call to me, lands far away.
Elves have forests to protect.
We need to build a wall.
Dwarfs their mines. Men their fields of grain. But we Harfoots have each other.
For I must now wander this wandering day.
We're safe.
You have fought long enough, Galadriel.
No.
Put up your sword.
The enemy is still out there. The question now is where?
It is over.
Nothing is over! Nothing! You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them!
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
Darkness will march over the face of the earth. It will be the end, not just of our people, but all peoples.
Everyone! I am sorry, but their time has come.
The past is with us all. The past is dead. We either move forward or we die with it.
This could be the beginning of a new era.
Away I must wander this wandering day.
To him finally being lionized in the prime, and his prime. Fuck.
Do it!
Shit.
Just do it! Don't let your dreams end. Yesterday, you said tomorrow. So just do it! Make your dreams come true!
Luke went from being... Oh, no. Welcome, Slayer Nation. I have some great news for you today. I hope you're all doing great. Nope, that didn't work. One more.
You have failed me for the last time.
Welcome, Slayer Nation. I hope...
If you're tired of starting over, stop giving up.
That is eating away at what you love in order for it to shine. And one man's vision is... Sometimes you don't have to make things better for them to be great again. You merely have to Okay. Hollywood continues to slow boil the culture and crazy. Well, right now, Spider-Man actor Andrew Garfield has stepped up and he's fighting motherfucker.
I can't do it. Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live! Fuck it!
And unbearded dwarves, but Prime didn't stop there. They stapled in intersectionality, individuality, biddiga-dig-bee, biddiga-dig-boo.
So it begins. At my signal, unleash hell.
George the Giant Slayer.
We're back, and we are blasting live from the Lone Star State, where we're going to unleash a Texas-sized takedown on Hollywood's latest mess. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. We got everybody crowding in today. And guess what? This week was one for the books. We got to see Critical Race Theory, the movie. So we're going to review, as it's like to be called, and it's being billed, the American Society of Magical Negroes. You know, it sells itself as like this fantastical satirical comedy, except satire requires truth in order to hit home. Comedy needs to be honest in order to be humorous. And every great movie must have a soul. And this one has none of it. It's just plainly simple, selling the message from the Hollywood hive. Black is good, white is bad, racism is back. And then Shogun is back in the news, and we're going to answer a question of a writer who says, hey, where are the melanated samurai in 1600s feudal Japan? And North Face, the company that provides, you know, all your outdoor clothing, they decided to step up their game in the culture war by offering a 20% discount to any customer that admits that they're a racist and then takes a 1-hour online course. After that, we have Gamergate 2.0 with Sweet Baby Inc. And then X-Men 97 showrunner Bo DeMeo was fired. Some think it was because he liked to take his clothes off, or maybe it's just because Kevin Feige thought, wow, we got a flop on our hands. But it all comes back around to something Tucker Carlson said in an interview this week about how our art and our architecture all seem to be designed today to demoralize us, to break us down into being like push-button sirs. So are you ready? Welcome, Slayer Nation. We're going to bring out our first guest who's back for his second time this week. And he is none other than the guy who battled Decepticons and conquered the charts with his music. Whether he is acting, singing, or tackling tough issues, give a big Slayer Nation welcome to the one and only unstoppable Matthew Marsden.
How you doing, George?
Doing great. Glad to have you back.
Thank you for having me. I've got to say, I just love that intro every time I see it. It just, it's fantastic. Great job on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. What do you think about that North Face? It was nuts when I read it.
I mean, all this stuff is just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's the same with Hollywood, right? It's the same with the process that they go through in Hollywood, that there's several layers that you have to go through before you actually get to getting out there and putting this stuff out, right? So it makes me think of those boardrooms where they sit there and they go, do you know what? I've got a really good idea. I think that we can do something about racists if we just give 20% off. How? Here's the thing. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this the other day. A lot of the ad companies are woke, right? So what you do is you have. I mean, I'm not saying that North Face are or aren't woke. I mean, I think that if you put that out there, then you pretty much are, right? Like you're certainly colluding with it. But if you go to a company, an ad company, and you say, hey, listen, what is the thing that I really need to hit on socially, like, you know, in some kind of like corporate social responsibility? And each one you go to says racism, 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 the patriarchy, racism, racism, racism. Eventually people are going to go, well, I guess that's what we need to do, right? And so what you have is you have this ecosystem, and it's the same thing with Hollywood, right? When people are sitting there and they're talking about what scripts need to sell or should be out there, they're not coming out with action movies, for the most part, action movies that people want to go and see. They come out with this woke crap, and it's because they're in this kind of like bubble where they're all like talking to one another, and they're not actually stepping out and seeing what the real world is all about. And I think you're seeing it more now with people just not going to the cinema, or that, you know, North Face is going to see there's a bunch of people that are going to go, I'm done with you, right? Because I hate to tell you, there's not a bunch of minorities climbing mountains, right? Like, I mean, when I did Anacondas and I said to Maurice Chestnut, I said, listen, this is true story. I said to him, look, I'm organizing a shark dive for all the cast, right? And he looks at me and he goes, black people don't do that. And he made me laugh. And I was like, what? He goes, that's for crazy white people. It's like diving with sharks. And I stopped and I thought, he's probably right. So there are certain things that people just don't do. And I don't think that, I don't know who North Face is trying to appeal to.
I think their ESG score, but you've raised a couple of good points, and I want to bring back a good friend of mine. We haven't seen him in a while. I'm always thrilled. This is a guy who has the perfect prescription for what ails Hollywood High. He's none other. Give a big Slayer Nation welcome to the amazing one and only Script Doctor.
Oh, hey. Thank you for that intro.
Absolutely. I mean, you heard what Matthew was saying.
Yeah, it's stuff that I've been dealing with since 2006. The diagnosis is the fact that once the internet kind of really took off, marketing departments relied solely on that for research as opposed to the traditional methods. And as a result, one thing we have learned the hard way over the last 2 decades-ish is that enough of a minority just has to be frequent and loud enough in order to skew the perspective of the majority. And I mean, listen, I've dealt with a lot of advertisers. The ones that were approaching retirement age when I was starting in Hollywood, they were in their 60s and 70s. They were brilliant people. The people that replaced them are utter morons. Like I've literally been sat in on marketing department stuff for advertising for movies and television shows and even tourism, where they basically, the best slogan they came up with is a nice place to visit.
A nice place to visit?
That's marketing of the 21st century. A nice place to visit. I scoffed at that and then was asked to leave because I thought it was utterly ridiculous. But like, there's no joy in it anymore. There's no play on puns. There's no setup, distraction, or surprise elements to it. You don't get any clever commercials where you think it's one thing and then you're blown away by it actually being something else. It's like, oh man, I want to buy that Henry vacuum cleaner now, or something. Like, you don't get those things anymore. And when you do get them, they do stand out, but they're completely forgotten about because you get all these other boring advertisements. And it's switched from a dynamic where a producer and a writer and a director and an actor, they all have an idea, they all put in a lot of effort to make a story, and then they hand it over to marketing and be like, hey, you have to sell this. And marketing's like, boom, challenge accepted. And now it comes to a point where they look at something and they're like, we don't know how to sell this. In which case I always say, what the heck are you doing? If I went to a doctor and I needed an exam and they said, I don't know how to examine you, I would not ever want to have that doctor again. So why do you get away saying that when every other profession out there can't get away with saying that? And once we can get to the source of that problem, then we will see a nice little domino effect of change and true progress, not regress, not ideology, but actual progress in getting people off their phones or competing with people for their attention from their phones back into theaters, back onto television, back into being outdoors again, too.
Oh, yeah. Touch grass. I agree with you, Script. But here's the question to both of y'all. Is it Hollywood that corrupted the culture, or did it trickle? Like, I feel since over the last 6 years that they're the ones who have polluted everything and like every industry has followed. Or do you think it's gone the reverse way? Like the corporations led the fight. It's just they weren't loud enough for it. Because we see right here, like I was saying, I mean, what kind of company is like Hollywood used to make magic, right? They gave the customers what they wanted. And it's now seems like everyone is at war with them. We got North Face ripped after offering a 20% discount to customers. You got to take a racial inclusion course. It's like, you admit you're a racist, tell it to everybody, and then take an hour course. Like,
it's a bullying tactic, if you ask me. It's like very, very grade school, playground tactics. I mean, it just makes me very happy that, since I entered high school, I decided, you know what, I don't want to be like all the other people. I'm not going to wear named brand clothing or things. So I have no North Face, no Canada Goose, nothing of the stuff that would normally keep me warm where I am in Canada. I just find other smaller labels or whatnot. But I think it has more to do with not necessarily that it's Hollywood in general, but it's definitely a pincer move from one angle of government and one angle of Ivy League education. And I use Ivy in quotes because I don't think the Ivy Leagues have been Ivy Leagues since
long time,
the 80s.
Yeah.
It's been like, I remember when I was applying to college and I applied to a couple of the Ivy Leagues, and I'm like, I'm really just paying for a lot more money for essentially the same education I'd get at a regular school, like a regular, post-secondary education. So why would I go into debt for something that I can get there? And then the other part too is, as an adult, the hardest lesson you have to learn is you never stop learning.
Right.
And we have literally generations, sizable parts of our generation that decided, okay, once I'm done school, I know everything and I'm done. And then they don't pay attention to the lessons that are being shared with them as they grow older. And that's why we have such a weird divide. For North Face to do this just screams desperation. It's like they want to be part of a conversation that makes no real sense. Why would you ever want to accuse your customers of being anything negative?
Right.
And then reward them for trying to be better with basically like taking away their time for 20% off. And it's just,
it's nuts.
I mean, I'm not surprised by marketing doing this, but it's pathetic.
I mean, I view Hollywood today, and Matthew, I want to see what you think, because you know it, as like Hollywood has almost become like the homeless shelter for Ivy League gender studies majors. It's like, but do they actually believe that? I mean, we hear them through the films, through their interviews, but like behind the scenes, are they like, this is all BS and I just got to say what I got to say to keep my job? Or are they cultists, devout believers in this woke ink?
I think you got elements of both.
Okay.
What you don't have is people like us standing up there and putting a little bit of normalcy into the conversation. You know, it used to be that like there needs to be Jordan Peterson talks about this, is there needs to be a push and pull from the left and the right, so you end up in somewhere like the center. And that is not the case anymore. It's just been pushed left. And the other thing is minorities don't want this. They don't want to be pandered to. They don't want to be, you know, I think initially it's like anything. You go, well, hang on a second. If I feel like I don't have the same amount of opportunity, right, that's another group was have, I want that. But what no one really wants is to be given something for free. Like that gets very boring.
It's demeaning
after a while. It's completely demeaning. It's completely demeaning. And to be honest with you, it's not minorities that are calling for this. It's white liberals that feel guilty about their Ivy League college that they didn't really. I mean, we saw this with the USC scandals and everything. That they didn't really earn it. I mean, all you got to do is look at the way like Asians as a demographic are discriminated against going into Ivy League colleges to know that it's not about that at all. And I mentioned this before last week about the guilt that you can. It's normally elites that have this guilt. Right. It's no one who's ever have to work for a living that has the guilt. They're like, well, hang on a minute. No, I work for this. So I have no guilt. I don't feel like I have to fulfill a quota or anything like that. Or I have to go in. Like if someone said to me, you have to go and, do a diversity and inclusion, I'd tell them to go and go away.
Yeah.
Right. Because
Exactly.
I'm like, I don't think that any minority as a human being is less capable than me. Right. I don't think that because the color of the skin means that they are less in any way, shape, or form than me. And that is the ultimate racism. Right. And so you have Hollywood that is moving to such a degree. But and it comes, I think that the thing with race comes from the sexual side of things. Right. In that, we want to make this not a problem, that not a problem. And so they go across the board with it. They have to say, well, anyone that might be marginalized in any way, shape, or form, we can't say that, hang on a minute. No, we can't say that you don't deserve this or that. Right. And so they do it blanket across the board. And the only thing that they don't, oddly enough, the only group that they don't really look after is white males.
Yeah, it's like
white straight males. I mean, it's the weirdest thing, right? That doesn't matter. So it shows that it's not equality.
Oh God, no!
It's not about equality. So
not at all. You had the other day Advil. Did y'all hear about that Advil new? I mean, again, we're stunned. But when you look back to the roots of it, I keep finding the fact that, for all the politics, I think that Hollywood marketing agencies, trying to do the whole ESG thing, but I think at the core of it, people have forgotten how to have fun and live. Just fun. Like, what happened to fun? Movies used to be fun. Commercials used to be fun. We make fun of them. The Super Bowl commercials, you name it, we'd have a blast. They'd sell you, people would buy stuff they never even wanted because it was engaging. And now I was trying to find it. You have this thing from Advil where I was like, oh my God.
Well, if you can't poke fun at something, right? Like you have to be able to laugh at yourself, right? And part of comedy is recognizing, your shortcomings or your prejudices or whatever it might be. And that's why Chappelle is so brilliant, right? He just calls it down the line. He doesn't care. And that's what we need. I mean, it's so important. And I think that, I mean, not to bring, well, I am bringing faith into it in a way.
Bring it.
But if you understand that we're all broken people, right? That we all have sin, then you understand that no amount of regulating is going to get that outside of a human soul. It's not going to cure you of that. Rules do not cure you of being a broken person. Okay. And they feel like, look, we're never going to get rid of racism. It's never going to go. Ever, 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 ever. It's
no, now they turned it into an industry on top of it.
And it's got worse. It's never going to go, because all you got to do is look at kids, right? Look at kids. And, you know, as I've got a bunch of them, and they'll go to school, and kids will be cruel to other kids. They're brutal to other kids, and they'll find something. Like sometimes they'll go, like, let's just say it's an all-white school. They'll go, that guy's too fat. That guy's too tall. That guy's got a big nose. That guy's eyes are too close together. If it's a mixed school, they'll find something in that.
Yeah.
And it just continues when you get older. That is part of human nature. And what you have to hope is that you teach people to be better people and look past that. You can't regulate it. No matter, there's no amount of force or compliance that is going to stop that, because all you do is you shove that prejudice back into someone's head and they just don't say it. That's why that's why I'm a big advocate of just let people say what they want to say.
Hell yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you know where they stand. That's it. But you can't regulate it. And Hollywood is really trying to do that. They're really trying to clamp down on freedom of speech, because look, I know, because if you say something, if you don't go along with the Borg, then they kick you out. Well, how is that being free? How is that having, you know, the marketplace of ideas where the best ideas come to the fore? And you certainly see, and I'll put it back to you guys to talk about this, is in screenplays. I mean, they are just a nightmare. And here's going back to, you know, what was said earlier about competence, is that David Mamet says, if you can't film it, if you can't film it, don't write it. Right. So a lot of people, and you see this over and over and over again, do not have the confidence in their writing that they're allowing a scene to play out, right? That they don't have the confidence to let the pictures tell the story. And so they slam it down, they push it down your neck, that they don't have the competence to really be a good storyteller. And so then what you do is you have this confluence of different things that are coming in, whether it's like, oh, well, you've got to put this message in and you've got to say this and you've got to make sure that they know that you're not really saying this. And so it just becomes really authoritarian filmmaking. And therefore, you don't get people really expressing themselves artistically. And then you get bad movies, basically.
Yeah, because art requires truth. Like you have to have a certain truth to it, something you craft. Art's that expression, like the ultimate expression of ourselves.
It's an expression, but more importantly, it's an exploration.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Like that's the thing. It's supposed to present ideas, whether they're problems or solutions, what have you, and then create a dramatic conflict about those for we to take your audience onto an adventure. And I said this last time I was on, and I still stand by it. I understand people like to use the word escapism, but that's akin to a distraction. And stories are not about distraction. They're about sharing ideas, sharing different perspectives, not preaching, sharing. That's it. Just sharing. Here's an idea I have. Here's an exploration of this. Here's some bad things that have happened for people that pursue this idea. Here are good things that have happened for people that pursue this idea. That's what it's all about. It's part of the entertaining aspect, but it's also about making the connection. And if you let, and here's the aspect of it, Hollywood wants a lot of their entertainment to be distractions. They don't want to light a fire under your butt to actually either improve just a small problem in your own life that maybe you didn't think about, not talking about changing the world, just be like, you know what? There's this guy that lives in a slum. Man, I look at my place. It's not a slum, but you know what? I should tidy up. There's a nice little message that you have in a story about that. That's not anything to say, oh, I just want to be distracted, turn my brain off. No, it's about engaging in the audience, and you have to have fun with it. And the fewer stories that we have that don't manage to engage with the audience is the why we're getting terrible writers that prefer to preach over something leading forward to it, as opposed to, hey, I have this idea, I have this situation, I have this point of view. Let me tell a really fun story And the idea is that by the end of it, the audience picks up on what idea I was getting at, that I'm not just letting it being a ball face on the nose dialogue moment. I just want that revelation, because everyone who sees a great movie and they realize what it's about at the end has that big smile on the face, whether the ending's depressing or not. It's satisfying. They're like, oh, that's what it was about. That is brilliant. I love it. And they want to go back and watch it again. And they want to tell their friends about it. And that's the magic of storytelling. That's why stories have been a huge part of our species since we've been able to communicate with each other. That's basically it. And when you try to boil that down and try and make it disposable or distraction or something else, we are now living in a part of that where it's all disheartening. It's just breaking us down. One of the things that I always advocated when I was first pitching in the early aughts was like, hey, I don't see many inspirational role models in stories anymore. I want to bring that in. I think that's a gap. That's a lucrative opportunity that's not being taken advantage of. And all I'd get back from producers is, yeah, but what's their flaw? I'm like, well, we can have a flaw of hubris, a flaw of arrogance that they overcome. He's like, I don't know if they should overcome it. And it's like, why? Like, why do you not want them to overcome arrogance? Iron Man 2008, his flaw is arrogance. He overcomes it. Great movie. Started the MCU. And you have a whole bunch of, and they're really just ignorant agents.
But that was fun.
Executives.
That was fun.
Yeah, and that was fun. And that's a great movie about changing your perspective on things. No accountability, arrogance to, you know what, I make these things, I'm responsible for them. I need to have more control in my company and the direction of what my family name and legacy means. That is a great message to have. And that is a normal storytelling message. And it's not political in any nature. It's about ownership and responsibility. And
I mean, who didn't like script, Matthew? Who didn't like the fact that after you would see a great movie, because I've always viewed them kind of like sitting around a campfire sharing a story. Like, who didn't like when we got out of the Matrix when I first saw it, or coming out of Iron Man? Me and my friends, we'd sit around for hours. Oh, did you see that scene? What did you think of that? What do you remember? I mean, that. Now it's like you want to go, okay, yeah, they just told us how bad we are. It's like someone wanted to have a Sermon on the Mount and say, hey, did you know?
Yeah, and it's funny because I was thinking about Iron Man exactly the same time, because that was about what was amazing about Iron Man as well is that's almost like Robert Downey Jr.'s story, right? Like you can see that he has this massive amount of internal conflict himself personally, and he has obstacles to overcome on many different levels, right? You know, you can see him working it out. Like, hang on a second, what is my responsibility? Who am I supposed to be? Like you say, what is my responsibility to my family name? Is it about money? Is it about, like, there's all this conflict that's going on. And then you go through the process of the MCU movies, and they've got more and more detached from human conflict, right? Human internal conflict. Like what the part about Iron Man is like every dude is sitting there going, would I do that if I was Tony Stark, right? Like it'd be really cool to be him, but you also see that he's flawed, that he's unhappy. And then you see as he goes along, you know, it's like that proof that Tony Stark has a heart, right? That's really, really good storytelling. And and that's why Robert Downey Jr. is absolutely the key to the MCU. And you look at what they did to Thor, on the other hand, which they destroyed that character. And nobody, boy. You know what? He is like, and Chris is probably the most masculine guy in that series. Like he's 6'4", whatever, he's jacked. He's and the way that started up is he's really heroic guy, and then they just made him a joke. It's almost kind of like what they're doing to dads in this world. They're making dads idiots, stupid, they don't know anything. But if you look as you go through the MCU, now it's all fake, right? So I remember when you first saw that really good bit of CGI, and you're like, wow, that can unlock so much. Now it's all let's get more people. Let's get more. We can't just have one villain. We've got to have 4 villains and 5 villains. And it's the same. We're talking about marketing. How do they market right now? We're going to put as many faces on the poster as possible. Think about Jaws. Jaws, one of the most iconic posters of all time. It's just a fish like that, right? With the
girl on top.
Girl at the top. See, we all know it.
Because it's there.
And if I was to say to you, tell me what the Force Awakens poster was, you'd probably go, I don't know.
A saber somewhere.
I don't know, like 5 people on there. It's just lazy. As the doctor said, it's that they're lazy. They're not really good at what they do. But again, and I just want to refer back to this. It's really important for people to understand about how in Hollywood it went from filmmakers making films. There's always been an element, obviously, of it is show business. So the old studio heads, they understood the market, right? But then as time has progressed, it's become more and more about having accountants come in to greenlight the films. Well, what does that mean? Well, all they do is they look at what worked in that movie, right? But they don't look at the story that worked in the movie because they don't understand that. But they look at what elements, what financial elements made that a success. Like, okay, we need Chris Pratt in because Chris Pratt brings in $50 million in international sales. And they kind of clump together the movies like that. And that's why you see more and more people on the poster, more and more people, more and more protagonists and antagonists in a film. They can't just do one anymore because they don't have the faith that that is going to sell the film. And if it fails, let's look at Madam Web. It failed, right? Well, you can imagine the discussion at the board meeting at Sony, right? They're going to go, well, you know, it's an established, well, I mean, you can establish Marvel character, but it's an established character, and we got Dakota in, and we got this person in, and we did, so it's not our fault.
No, it's everybody else, the bigots, the fans, the haters. It's not the story.
Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, that's literally what they say, right? It's not our fault. It's their fault because we put all the elements in place. And it's like anything. You can get a whole bunch of car parts and try and throw them together. It doesn't mean you're going to make a Bugatti.
No,
it doesn't mean it's going to be fast, right? It doesn't even mean it's going to work. But this is the way they approach things. And then you add that additional element of wokeness in there, and it's a complete disaster. It's
like welcome to the Thunderdome. That's the thing. It's like instead of going to the movie and going on a roller coaster that has a good time, like Godzilla -1 for me. Mm-hmm. Within 5 minutes of watching that movie, I somehow the subtitles just melted away. I mean, they were there, but it didn't pay attention. It was so engrossing. But then you go to Madam Web and it's like, welcome to the Thunderdome. We're going to lecture you from the, mountain. But it was a bad movie.
You can't moneyball art. Like
there
that's
you go.
the problem. You can't moneyball art. Listen, you can statistically, make something better, but you still need to have a good story to do so beforehand. Like right now, they're doing it in reverse. Well, we've got to. I mean, it's almost like old Hollywood where they had John Wayne and Gene Kelly and Marilyn Monroe under contract. Like, we need to make movies for these people because these people bring audiences in. But they never said, well, it's got to still be good. Like they still nowadays, we don't even get the good part. In fact, the two writers who did Madam Web. Now, I'll argue that Madam Web, for the potential of woke it could have, it was very, very minimal, almost non-existent, because they never actually diminished or made fun of Ben Parker. They actually all liked him. So
I just want to say one thing,
but it was still bad.
Okay, I just want to. I want to get your feedback on this. I've been waiting to ask you this. That's why I don't mean to interrupt. I just want you to attach this to your thought. Yes, it wasn't woke in what we saw, but here's the thing: if the company, if the production, if everyone behind there has those values, embraces that social justice, we're all broken toys and we want to break the world so we can all feel good about ourselves. If they are woke, then the heart of it, the core, the foundation is woke, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it may be behind it, but the thing is, it still has to be exemplified in the work itself, right? Because otherwise they're just hiding.
Right, but who are they hiring? That's what I mean. When you have people who believe in woke or in social justice or in identity politics, right? They're not looking to hire. Let me get the best talent. Let me get the best screenwriters. Let me get the best director who fits this. It's like Amazon Rings of Power. Day one, they announced for season 2, we're going to hire all female directors. They didn't say we're hiring female directors who are the best. We're going to hire the ones who know fantasy, high fans. Have they have any time behind the camera? Have they been on set? They didn't say any of that. We just want to fill our DEIA slot. That's what I mean by the foundation of Madam Web is woke. So who do they hire to fill in the roles? They took in a TV director who did great. I looked at her past. It was like great, but never had shot a movie. Why would they do that?
Well, I mean, every director who wants to transition from television to film has to start somewhere, and either a studio is foolish in doing that or brilliant in doing that, depending on the merits of that director. But Matthew will know this just as well as I, that sometimes when you want the best, you realize that's bringing in conflict, because sometimes the best justifies they don't have to listen to you because they're the best. So when you're dealing with producers who are like, I want the best, but I also want the best to listen to what I have to do, you then actually narrow your selecting choice. Now, when it comes to the pair of writers that wrote Madam Web, they have a track record of actually producing some pretty terrible scripts. Whether or not that's their entire final product, or it's them acquiescing to the will of the producer to rewrite it into the way that they want, we will not know that for sure. But what we do know is, because they keep getting work, is that they're definitely good team players with those producers, which means it's not really about merit, it's about cooperation. And that's the other problem too, is the some of the best stories you have on film, especially with The Godfather, is like, well, the producer and the director and the studio and even some of the talent were all fighting with each other because they all had their own way of wanting to do something, but they managed to get it done because they realized that they had the same shared goal of telling a great story within this movie. And they had to just put some of those differences aside, or they had to compromise. But now we've got a Hollywood that doesn't want to compromise. That's why you get these directors that make it big on the independent scene. They are plucked out of that before they actually earn their meritocracy with the rest of the audience. And then they are manipulated to do what the big studio wants because, and I don't fault them for doing this, they have this great opportunity. They're getting lots of money, and it's a great point on their resume that helps them get financing for their own independent stuff. So yes, they basically swallow your ego. You do what the studio tells you, you get the work done, and ideally you go on to make another film with all that money that you have. Doesn't always work out that way because the studios can't control how those movies get distributed, and you end up killing a whole generation of potentially wonderful filmmakers by basically the producers figuring out that, we get them quick early when they're young, especially getting them while they're young in the industry. We can manipulate them to do what we want, and now we don't have to be the director, but we can actually honestly say that movie wouldn't exist for us, when many producers have said that for decades, where they did very little but they would take all the credit. Heck, Oscars happened just last couple weeks ago. I'm certain many of us all on the panel and in the chat remember many years ago, some random lady came up on the Oscars and did an acceptance speech for a black director who won, and nobody knew who the heck she was. She was a producer that left the project, but her name was still on it. And she just walked right up on stage in the middle of that guy's speech. But everybody in Hollywood knew, yes, we know all producers are like that. They take credit for something they didn't do. Now they're actually taking credit for something they did do. And at the same time, when it fails, they said, oh, no, it's all them. Like Bob Iger just did recently with the Marvels.
Right. But you bring up the Oscars. I'm going to go back to say, I'm starting to view Hollywood and this whole woke Inc. as, not everyone, obviously, but again, as like broken toys who want to break everything in order to feel normal. That's part of it, I see. Part of this indoctrination. But you saw the Oscars last week. Now, what do y'all both think? John Cena coming out. Because you were just talking about Chris Hemsworth, ultimate masculine guy in the Marvel universe, but turned into a whiny, comical soy boy. And then we had Cena come out. And I can see it from both angles. Like, they take someone who's masculine in his films, who does poke fun at himself, but then it looks like it's a shaming ritual, or it's a great comic routine.
Look,
I've started from both sides.
I lost respect for him when he did that whole thing speaking in Chinese. Yeah. I was like, I'm done, dude. Yeah. He doesn't have to do that. He's John Cena. He could, he's kind of carved out an industry for himself. And, we all like those guys that have a laugh at themselves. Like we said before, we all should be able to do that.
Hell yeah.
But this is the friggin' Oscars. Right. I grew up like dreaming and thank God I actually went when Black Hawk Down won 2 Oscars. And that's when it meant something. It doesn't mean anything. Just because now the movie that should have won the Oscars this year, right? Like Oppenheimer. And you talk about, let's just be clear about this. When you're talking about, as the doctor was just saying, if you're talking about a filmmaker, which I believe filmmakers have to, I always say this, they have to be benevolent dictators, right? Because you've got to want to get that movie made. And Chris Nolan is a classic example of that, because he's probably one of only a handful of directors that can go out there and make exactly the movie that he wants to make. And nobody's going to tell him otherwise.
That's brilliant.
But I do want to go back and talk about, again, what was being said about people kowtowing to the powers that be. Look, if you are a director, it's the same as an actor, right? Like, as an actor, there is like that chance that you're going to get in and make movies. People don't understand, even on the lower levels, even if you get like a bit part in something, it is so hard. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are going to go and do it. So if you go and have a success, if it's a small movie, and then Marvel comes in and is going to give you $150 million to go and make a movie, what are you going to say? You're going to say yes. And because what the agent will tell you, I'll tell you right now, is they'll say, hey, listen, as the good doctor said, we're going to fund your next 2 movies or your next 3 movies, or this is going to set you up forever, because you've done a big studio film. And nobody's going to say no to that. And then they might go into it with all the best intentions, but they don't have the clout to turn around and go, no. As you've seen, very few actors come out and say no about anything. Right. So imagine when it's on that kind of level, when you know that if you say no, your agent's going to dump you, your manager's going to dump you. And next thing you know, you're shooting wedding videos. Right.
But what about Nolan? You brought up Nolan, not to interrupt. You brought up Nolan. It seems like he has stayed pure his entire career somehow.
But look, he started before this. That's why.
Yeah, he was pre this. I mean, he did in what was it? The first
Insomnia.
one.
Memento.
Insomnia, Prestige.
No, what's the one with the tattooing now?
Memento.
Memento.
Chuck Roven. Yeah, Chuck Roven's been protecting him a lot. So
Chuck Roven. So, and by the way, Chuck Roven is, like you say, he's one of the best producers in Hollywood, and he will push back. And when you get someone like Chris Nolan, he understands as well that you've got a guy there that's got a resume as long as you like, who wants to make the best movie possible. And when he's pushing back on you, you probably need to listen to him. Right. You know what I mean? So there's a yin and a yang. When I did Black Hawk Down, Ridley Scott made the movie, one of the greatest directors of all time, but Jerry Bruckheimer was producing it. You know what I mean? So you got
he was shielding everybody.
Yeah, you have 2 titans there, though, that if Ridley walks in and he's going to listen to Jerry because Jerry's made $1 kajillion, and he might not take on all of his suggestions, but he's going to listen to them. He's not going to dismiss them. Now you get a first-time director going into Marvel, or second-time director. What are they going to do? They're going to go, okay, yeah, well, I've never done a movie this size, and let me tell you, there is a big difference when you jump up those levels. Right. And certainly when, you don't really have an established star in those films like a Tom Cruise, who also is another element that would come into this, that would push back or want excellence. Okay. So, with Chris Nolan, he's probably, I worked a little bit on one of his films, and they are just massive. They are just so big, and whatever he says goes. And he delivers, right? Not only does he deliver beautiful movies that are really great, but they make a lot of money, and that's the kind of golden ticket, right? Like you're making, essentially art films. He does make action movies, but they are artsy, but they make $1 kajillion. Okay, who's going to tell him no?
No one, and he's brilliant that way. I want to bring in. There's another person we have here, and this guy knows everything about sci-fi, from Stargate to Trek. He's been to the undiscovered country and back. Welcome, Brian from Popcast. I want to bring him to this conversation because I think he has a lot to say about it.
To the undiscovered country and back. I love that. That's awesome.
Hell yeah.
I'm so sorry I'm late, man. I'm so sorry.
No, not a problem.
I messed up my times again. I did this twice in a row. I
thought 2 o'clock. It's messed up everyone.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, nice being here. Script Doctor Matt. Nice seeing you guys.
Nice to meet you.
So, what'd you think about what Matthew was saying?
Well, I caught the tail end of it.
It was all brilliant, Brian. It was all brilliant.
It was all brilliant. You know what you said about Nolan being true to his craft and all that. It's pretty spot on. I think you have to keep when it comes to Hollywood, you have to keep your head down and just do your thing and hope it all works out and be genuine to yourself. Once you kowtow to like the message, to the liberal agenda, I think that's just the beginning of the end for you, because it's going to affect your art. It's going to affect your art 100%. The second you start leaning into the message, it'll affect your art, and then eventually the fans are going to respond poorly. And when they do, you're on your way out. No matter how well the award the awards people give you awards, how much accolades you get from liberals and Twitter and whatever, those don't matter. Results matter. And when the results start to falter, no amount of Oscars in the world is gonna get you out of that tailspin. and they can pretend all they want that what they're creating is high art, but results matter. And if people aren't watching your movie, aren't buying your music, aren't whatever, if they're not spending money on you, then they're not supporting you, and no amount of award shows are gonna change that. And you know what? That just goes to show, like, now when you see some of these movies where it's like, or Emmy award winning producer, Oscar winning director, you're like, and
what's next? You got a bridge for sale?
Yeah, that used to mean something when you saw
long time ago.
A long time ago, the award winning director of this. You're like, oh, okay, it might be good. Now you're like, so that means it's probably bad, right?
Can I make a point about that? It's funny because before you came on, we were talking about elite colleges, right? Like Harvard. That's exactly the way I feel when someone says so-and-so and so-and-so. Certainly if they're below a certain age, they went to Harvard. I'm like, I do not want to hire you ever, right? Because that is a PR or an HR disaster like coming down the pike. And I think it's the same when you get to the Oscars now, certainly in the past 10 years. I mean, they've been horrible. I mean, even Best Actor Awards, you kind of go, and that's really sad, right?
Like how? Right? How?
It is sad. I'm going to date myself here, but I remember movies like Amadeus winning, Chariots of Fire. I mean, you'd get movies that would knock you away. When Nicholson was, I think it was called, he was with Meryl Streep in one, Ironweed. I don't know if it's called Ironweed. But you had films that were not only great, but they felt. Does that make sense? Like, they felt Oscar worthy. Like,
they felt grand, right?
They felt grand. There you go. It's like my family used to get together when the Oscars were coming. They would be like, okay, whose house is going to be out? Who's going to make appetizers? Who's going to cook? And people would get dressed up to watch the Oscars in their home.
I remember that.
It would be an event. And now it's like, I was telling my girl, I was like, yeah, the Oscars are coming out. She's like, what's that?
To be fair, I remember the same people that got dressed up for Oscars also getting dressed up for WrestleMania 24. So
but there was a certain amount of prestige to it back then,
right?
Well, it was also an indication of who was going to have a big career. Like I know that might sound silly, but because you look and you say, well, aren't they further on in their career to get the Oscars? But no, not really. I mean, if you look at Good Will Hunting, you look at Rocky. And a bunch of other movies that were really they broke talent that have gone on to be massive stars. And even as recent, like say, as Good Will Hunting, that was an indicator of future success, right? So you'd look and you go, well, listen, if I win an Oscar, if I'm in a movie that wins an Oscar, then it really means something. It's kind of a stamp of quality. I know, because when I first, again, name dropping again, when I came over and I did Black Hawk Down, it made everything very different for me and the rest of the guys in that film. Now, we were all of a group that were the up and coming guys coming over, whether it was the Brits coming over or whether it was, Nikolai Waldo or Eric or any of the other guys. But that was a moment where everyone was like, oh crap, like these guys are really, really great. And you look at the careers that people have had. Now they were on their way anyway, because that's the way, the genius of Ridley and Jerry Bruckheimer in that instance was they got all the young talent in. And of course, everybody was like, yeah, I want to Ridley Scott. But you could see the trajectory of people's careers after then. And now it's not like that. Like, I don't think I look at someone and go, oh, they really earned that, or that was a really great piece of work. I don't think of it like that anymore. And I said to, I have an amazing script that hopefully is going to be going into production pretty soon. A friend of mine wrote it, brilliant. And I always used to say it could be an Oscar-winning screenplay. And I genuinely now think that that's a bad pitch. Wow. Right? I do. I hate to say it. It's like, I don't think it's the stamp of quality that it used to be. I mean, for me, certainly, and some people might go, well, you'll never win one anyway. I always looked at an Oscar. I'm like, if I can win an Oscar, like that is the ultimate, that is the peak, that is like the stamp of approval. You've hit the top. I don't care anymore. I don't think they matter. I don't. Wow. It's sad.
Does like anybody remember who won last year? Like we used to remember like from previous years what was best movie, who was best actor, actress. I don't know that they've lost something.
That comparison to like the high, quote unquote, higher learning is actually really awesome because, when they started to lose that prestige with a lot of employers and the general public, was when they stopped worrying about creating the best, and they started worrying about making sure that what they thought the best was going to be understood the mission, the narrative, the message. And when those people started to leave college and universities, and instead of worrying about being the best at their job, they started worrying about transforming wherever they went into whatever their version of society was supposed to be. That's when it started to drop. And I don't know when that started to happen, but I remember watching shows like Suits and Castle and thinking like, oh, that's a Harvard guy. That means that he's the best lawyer, the best whatever, right? And then you see those exact same people in real life, and they're morons. They're absolute morons, and they concern themselves way more with the ratio of this color of skin to that color of skin inside of a certain workplace than they actually concern themselves with being the best. And I think that's a perfect comparison.
Ivy Leagues became far more about reputation and less about the quality. They completely forgot what made the Ivy Leagues the Ivy Leagues. Well, the smartest kids went there. They were taught by the smartest people. They were challenged in the most difficult of ways. They persevered. They came out, and now they're going to go and have a positive effect on society around them. But then when they realized, wow, this reputation is super high, all I need is just to have that reputation associated with my name, and I will open up all these other doors for me, whether I'm qualified or not. And that's basically the disservice of what those institutions failed to maintain in their own doctrine. It's basically like, no, we want only the best people. And I mean, the silly aspect of it is that you're literally paying to go to a school. So from a customer service standard, if you have the money, you should get in. But the schools, the universities, the Ivy Leagues are like, well, no. It's not enough that you have the money. You also have to be worthy of intellectually of being here as well as a participant. But they started to phase that out. They then said, now you don't even need the money. Just do a student loan. And if you fit in that, then you can come in. And so now you've just diminished the value of that.
Right.
And
maybe somebody else will pay for it for you too when you get the student loan. Someone will write it off unconstitutional.
Right.
Let's take a second. See if we have any super chats to have any questions for anybody. Fletcher, can you tune them up? Okay. From Mexican Army, from our producer who's not here today, but he's still here in spirit. Mr. Marsden is correct in his North Face assessment. I don't know if you caught that earlier, Brian. We were talking about North Face and how they were offering now 20% discount on anything in their store if you admit you're a racist and take a 1-hour online course.
No, that's not real.
Yeah,
that's real.
I'll show it to you again. Yeah.
Listen, I like North Face. I'm about to go and admit I'm racist right now.
Yeah, but you have to take a 1-hour online course.
Online though, I could save 20%. Are you kidding me? I could turn around and sell that on eBay for full price.
But don't you think? See, right there. I know it's. But don't you think that's the problem with a lot of people today? Think about it, right?
Right, yeah.
But that we think in a short, and I'm not attacking you in that way, but there are a lot of people who would go, yeah, that's a good deal. I'll admit it, racist. I'm going to get my 20% off. I'm going to do a flip. But the North Face is going to gather all this data. They're going to present and go, look how many racists there are in this country.
I know. No, you're totally right. I'm joking. I'm not actually going to do
I know you're not. But
I think it's insane that that's even allowed. Like, how are they not being criticized for this?
I have a feeling, by the way, that it would only be relevant if you are white.
Right.
Can you imagine like a bunch of black guys turning up and going, "Okay, I think I'm racist."
Yeah.
I think I need to take the course, and they'd be like,
I do a community thing at a black church every Tuesday. I'm gonna go tell them about this. But guys, listen, you guys are all wearing these North Face jackets. You can get 20% off.
And they would also say, "There's no way I would ever wear a North Face jacket." That's the funny thing. But it's all completely absurd. And I hate to say this. I hate to make this about politics.
Right.
But it all got worse with Obama.
It did.
All got worse with Obama. Like, me
it's my
growing
fault.
up,
I voted for him.
Oh, no.
A lot of people voted for him, but let me see what Mexican Ironman said. He said, Mr. Marsden is correct in his North Face assessment. Shockingly, me and my Mexican cousins would rather hang out at the beach or in the desert versus spend days climbing a snow-ridden mountain. When he said Great White, the shark dive, I was all for it, but yeah, he was right.
Yeah, no, because they're not stupid like we are. I mean, by the way, I'd totally be down with him. I'd rather be at the beach than up a mountain. I did that once, and I don't want to do it again.
Yeah, a lot of my friends are like, "Hey, we're gonna go skydiving this week," and I'm like, "You're insane. Why would you do that?"
I've done that as well.
I was airborne in the military, and I wanted that extra $140 or whatever a month they gave you for being airborne, and it wasn't worth it.
No,
it wasn't
do the jump.
I had about there was still like a 30% chance of dying at some point, and for $130 a month,
you're like, my ass is worth more than that.
I was young, and I didn't realize that I was worth a lot more than $130 a month.
Hey, dude, they don't send old people off to war. That's a reason why they get them young, right? Because
that's true.
Like, yes, I want to go in.
The 20-year-olds that don't know any better.
You're invincible. You can do it. Lover of Green for $10. The critical drinker is under attack. He is. I didn't know that. Okay. Jose Bird, an unhinged bread tuber, made a 1-hour diatribe against critical drinker. The video is a woke train wreck. It'd make for a great segment on Mahler's E-Fat. Okay, Lover of Green, I'm going to check it out. Hopefully, Mahler will cover it. Mexican Iron Man just gifted 10 Georgia Giant Slayer memberships. Our membership stream is coming up in not this Wednesday, but the Wednesday after. So grab your memberships so I can see you there. So you can jump on the panel. Last time we had a lot of fun. Greek Light for $20. Keep informing us of truths about politics, current news, and our pop culture in general. Go, George. Thank you, Greek Light. You know what the saddest thing about that is? Is that we have to talk about politics when it concerns movies. I just want to talk about movies or how the comics used to be or a favorite television show like Shogun. But Mr. Buttcrack Media, member for 2 months. Hail, George, and the great panel in the chat. Mr. Buttcrack Media, your amazing support keeps us going, keeps the lights on. Thank you for all you do, because I know, there it is, you gifted 5 George the Giant Slayer memberships. Thank you, Mr. Buttcrack Media. Always great to see you. And then we got Aiken. He's a member for 2 months. Hail, all sanity seekers and defenders. Hail to you, Aiken. Hope to see you in the next stream. Angela Richter, member for 2 months. Glad to see Matthew. He was James Taggart. Yes, he was. Aaron Charman gifted 5 Georgia Giant Slayer memberships. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Were you in that show Castle?
I did an episode of that. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, just one episode.
I've been binge watching Castle, and I thought for half a second when I first saw him, like, this guy looks like I feel like I just watched you in an episode of Castle yesterday.
I just say it's kind of a nightmare on those shows because you're walking in. Like normally, what they'll do is if you come in for a guest star, and for years I didn't do them. I refused to do guest stars, and then they got me on my Achilles heel when they said it's a military guy. So
it was a bomb guy, right?
No, in this one in Castle, I was an astronaut. I was a pilot. But what's funny about those is because they have such a high turnover doing the episodes that they load you up as a guest star with all the dialogue, and especially if you're a Brit, they're like, you can do it all, right? So you have pages, and so I walk in and the one scene I had to do was an interview, and it was like a real long piece, right? And you're kind of there, and you're like, I can't mess up because everyone's set up. They're expecting you to come in and nail it because they just want to move on because you're just a guest star. And I'm sitting there, and the guy is no joke. The guy in front of me, I can't even remember what his name was. He was yabbering all the way up until the take, and I'm like, I'm not like that, right? I have to be in the zone. I have to, not that I have to go off and like be in my own space, but I need to focus on what I'm going to do. And he goes, this is no joke. Just before the take, he goes, and he starts choking, and I'm like, what? And he goes, oh, it's okay. And I'm like, and then they go rolling, and I'm like, what the, and then we're in. So that was that scene. You don't see those kind of things. He didn't give a shit because he wasn't on camera. It was all on me, and I'm like, oh, and there was one big, I remember it was a big long tracking shot and another moving shot here. And I was like, oh, man. And I was just thinking, this guy's going to die. He's going to choke in front of me. And then I had to get my head back into doing the scene. So it's rough when you're going as a guest star. That's all I'm going to say.
I mean, you must have done well if I remembered you. And I have seen like 113 episodes in the last like 5 days. So
I just would focus on Stana Katic. Stana. Sting.
Yeah.
Did you meet Nathan Fillion?
No, I didn't. You know, it's a funny thing about that because you guys will love this being loving sci-fi. Is when I very first came over to Hollywood, I heard that they were doing this guy called Joss Whedon was doing this show called Firefly.
Firefly, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, huh, okay. And so I remember vividly, it was one of my first auditions, and they called me back, and I was right in the running. And they wanted to call me back for a third day.
No.
And my agent goes, "You don't want to go in for that. We've got something else." Because that guy's done like, I think at that point he'd done Buffy, right? Like he'd done Buffy.
Yeah.
And they were like, "It's fluff. You really need to come over and do this other thing." And it was for the pilot. And I've never watched it because I don't watch things that I don't get. So there's a lot of that. There's a lot of stuff I don't watch. But yeah, it was one of the roles in Firefly. And, so I never met Nathan. I was actually meant to go back and do The Rookie. He's meant to be a really super nice guy. I actually saw him at Costco in Burbank once, but he's meant to be a super nice guy from what I know. I know that my scene was with her in Castle, and she was really lovely, and we had a chat about Tom Sizemore, which was kind of very interesting because she'd worked with him. And obviously I'd worked with him, but that's a conversation for off
another day. Okay, off camera. Well, we have, now that we're going more into this pop culture minefield, there's no one better to have than a master strategist at the helm. We have little Platoon is here. Hello, my friend.
Evening. Actually, it's afternoon there, isn't it? Good afternoon. Hello. Sorry
Yes.
I'm late.
No, not a problem. Which you came right in time. I was about to ask Matthew, and I want to hear what you think. What do you think? You think a movie like Black Hawk Down could be made today?
Ooh. Yes, I think so. Maybe not sort of like 5 years ago, it might have been harder to do, but I think certainly you're seeing the success of things like Terminal List on Amazon, that there is an increasing appetite for relatively uncomplicated straight action flicks again, and they are making lots of money. And they're doing pretty well. So I think, yeah, broadly speaking, now you could probably see something like that. Whether we will see something of that quality in the near future is another question, but theoretically you could make it.
But DEI requires that at least 40% of the cast be gay and transsexual. It's going to make for and at some point they're going to stop in the middle of a firefight and have an entire conversation about their feelings and how their father didn't accept them when they were growing up, and it's going to be.
I remember that scene in Extraction, man. That was a beautiful scene in Extraction with Chris Hemsworth. Did you see that? Well, I mean, to your point, George, it's not that whether or not they'll make it. They'll make it. The question is how will it be distributed? What type of audience will they make it reach at all? Because if you can take a look at some of the slates of what the studios have, and even some of the smaller production houses, there are a huge set of actioneer films, low budget, medium budget stuff there you never hear of. And the reason being is like, well, does Hollywood want to invest and distribute that, or do they not? Nick Cage did like 4 movies last year. I think you only heard of one of them. and that's it. Like, it's whether or not the studio is willing to advertise it. It's not whether or not they'll make it. They'll make anything if they think there's a slight profit on it, especially if the budget's under control. The question is how much are they going to push it? They'll push. I mean, Disney right now is leading Hollywood. They're slowly losing the grip over it, which thank God. But they're the ones that basically dictate, okay, well, these are the ideologies, these are the terms that we think Hollywood needs to meet, and this is the stuff that we're going to push forward. And all the other studios kind of bow in line because they were the big Paramount. I mean, not actual Paramount. They were the big powerhouse of Hollywood for a decade. Before them, it was Warner Brothers for a long time. And Warner Brothers was peaks and valleys all over the places. Like, they dominated the 80s, and they kind of fluttered in the 90s, and then they kind of peaked a little bit with Nolan in the early 2000s. Then they were completely dwarfed by Disney. And Paramount was huge in the 70s, and they were tug of warring in the 80s with Warner Brothers. And then Universal was just kind of always there, but they never really kind of stirred the pot. Nowadays, like right now, Disney is kind of on fire. They've got their lawsuits. They've got their downsizing that they've been doing. They've canceled movies that they've rumoredly announced. They're losing hold. And then whatever studio comes in to take place of that is going to be the direction of Hollywood. And so far, it looks like it's going to be Warner Brothers because they had the biggest movie last year. Universal is nipping at their heels because of Oppenheimer. I think that's a good set of competition because both of them have experimented in the DEI stuff, but they've also quickly abandoned it just far faster than than Disney has. In fact, like Universal did, what was it? They did Terminator Dark Fate, they did Charlie's Angels, and they basically have said, wow, we screwed up. We're not going to do that again.
Big time.
And they got really close with the Exorcist sequel there. And then they're basically like, well, now we're going to downplay the follow-ups to that because we screwed up there. Sony, on the other hand, name a very divisively woke film after Ghostbusters 2016 that they produced. It's really hard because they learned the lesson.
Madam Web?
Also Sony. No, Madam Web's not woke. Madam Web is just bad. That's
yeah, I know it's not woke on the screen. I just feel it's bad because it's woke. But I see what you're saying. You're saying directly.
It's
woke.
about the content of the product, right? So
Right.
Sony, they make some great movies, but they also are known to make a lot of bad movies, just like every studio. Because again, 90% of movies that are made aren't always great because it's a crapshoot. They're trying to make something good. They all believe in the project, and they should. Sometimes it just doesn't resonate with the audience. But that's why when we reflect on the movies that we like, we can name them a lot quicker than we can of all the other movies that came out that year, right? Because the best always rises to the top, and the rest we kind of forget because they didn't measure up, and that's just the nature of the game. I want to get back to that again, where we forget the bad movies because they're bad, and not hate them just because they have an ideology to them. Like,
Correct.
Get rid of the ideology, and it's like, wow, that's a bad movie, but you know what? I could at least laugh at that.
Right, but how do you do that? When I was asking the question about Black Hawk Down, I mean, I understand your answer, but how do you do that when you have things like this, where Shogun is the #1 show on Hulu right now, right? Except you're starting to get articles. It's like, where are the black people in feudal 1600 Japan?
Well, that's the trades, and that's the journalists for you, right? Because they're part of the advertising wing of the studio system to a degree. And if they're the ones that are criticizing these things and they're trying to, circumvent the authority and the creative agency of the studio, and if the studio succumbs to that, then who's the one really creating the art, right?
I know, but is it the studio putting it out there? Is it the studio putting it out there to get the journalist to write it? Or is the journalist looking for access and repeating what the studio wants? Because here's a clue. There weren't any black people back then. I went and do the research. There were some, but none of them were in the government. And what Shogun was
they were on a different continent. Yes. Like they existed in that period, just not in that region. Like that's
correct. So why would somebody say that?
One black samurai in all of history, and that means that we have to have much more black representation. The Japanese back in that period were incredibly insular. I think it's slightly after the period in time in Shogun is set, but you had the Portuguese missionaries go over, and about 10-15 years later, the Japanese Shogun decided actually the whole Christianity thing isn't really working out, so we're just going to kill everyone. All of the Christians, butcher them, murder them, tens of thousands just gone. And then the religion dies in Japan, and foreigners are restricted to one port on the East Coast, and they're not allowed on the mainland because they're incredibly protective of what was then the national identity and the gene stock and all the rest of that stuff. So you're not going to expect to see diversity in feudal Japan. It's just not, not of that sort. Anyway, there's pretty big differences between obviously people from the north and the south of Japan, but that's not the diversity we're interested in, because it's not American diversity, or it's not like very, very obviously parlayable into modern political conversations type diversity. It's a silly trite thing. I think in the case of that particular article, that's just a journalist who's looking for a quick way to make some sort of
splash.
Yeah.
That's not really in communication with the studio system. I mean, there are instances where studios will absolutely try and manufacture political narratives, which they know that certain journalists will pick up on for free because it constitutes free advertising. So when the Obi-Wan Kenobi show comes out and Disney starts saying, oh, all of this horrible racist death threats that the actress Reva gets, for example, very little of that's actually demonstrable. There's very little evidence put forward, but all the actors come out and they do those little hostage videos in their cars. And Simon Pegg comes out and says, isn't it terrible? And all of the mainstream media and most of the entertainment media online starts just parroting this line over and over and over again, which is a really good way of making people aware that the Obi-Wan Kenobi show is currently streaming on Disney. Didn't you know? Now you do. That's free advertising. In the case of that particular article you just showed, though, I think that's just an idiot being an idiot.
One guy. Okay, well, I would like that if it's just one idiot. But Matthew, you worked with Obi, Ewan McGregor.
I did, yeah.
Well, what was he still doing? Kind of like, did he have that kind of mentality back then? Or
no, he was a lovely guy. I mean, I got on with him super well. Very hardworking, very committed. He'd just done Star Wars, so that was a big deal. When we were training with the Army Rangers, they were like, Obi-Wan's doing the Kill House, kind of, which is kind of funny. But I'd love to do a thought experiment with you guys on this, talking about Black Hawk Down.
Yeah.
So let's imagine we're going to make Black Hawk Down today, because when we did the press tour for Black Hawk Down, and I think it was the Grosvenor House in London, a journalist got up, and this was like kind of an indicator of what was to come. A guy stood up, a journalist, and he said, shouldn't they call this black man down? And I was like, it's in Somalia, right? It's in Africa. There are Africans in Africa. I don't know. Maybe if it was in Newcastle, it'd be something different. And I remember thinking that was really peculiar. Maybe in my naivety, I was just like, this is a story, right? But let's just say this. We're going to make Black Hawk Down. So let's look at the different things that would affect it. The Black Hawk Down that I did, the director was a white male. The writer was a white male. The producers were white males. The studio executive was a white male. The cast, pretty much all white males, apart from Gabe Cassius and Enrique Muciano, who's Mexican, I believe. So, all right, we have a problem, right? So instead of just going by the people on their merits, which is Ridley's one of the greatest directors of all time, Jerry Bruckheimer, Branko Lustig, two of the greatest producers of all time, you could go through it and look and say, well, okay, so we're going to have to get some diversity in there at some point. And how do you do that? Like, what does that look like? Do you get a female director in? Okay, maybe Catherine Bigelow, right, would be a good person to bring if that. Okay. And then you have the problem of the majority of Army Rangers. If you were airborne, the majority of Army Rangers are white guys, right? They're from the South for the most part. They're white. And then you're going into Africa with a bunch of black people.
So a bunch of Southerners shooting a bunch of black people is what you're saying.
All right, yeah. So they're going to be like, we can't do that. It doesn't matter that's got nothing to do with it. Then you add in the political aspect that was, and anyone who knows the story, there was the political aspect of it. That went on, and I'm not going to get into it, but that went on through the Clinton administration. And there were steps that happened in the Clinton administration that exposed those guys when they shouldn't have been. Okay, so we can't say anything about that. So where do we go? And I want to ask you guys and the people that are on the chats, how different is the movie going to be if you swap any one member of that group? Because Simon West was meant to direct Black Hawk Down, and it just, I can't remember why he didn't do it, but it got dragged on and dragged on and dragged on, and he went off and did Tomb Raider, I believe, and that opened it up, and then Ridley came in and said, okay, I'm going to come and do Black Hawk Down. So how would a different director change that? Because it would have been a very different movie if Simon West would have directed it. And what if any of those positions would have changed? And would the story have changed? Would they have said, hang on a second, I've got to get... Because Ken Nolan, who is an amazing screenwriter, is a very good friend of mine. And, he took Mark Bowden's book, who, he did Killing Pablo as well. But he took Mark Bowden's book and he just made the movie of the book. Right? There wasn't any agenda. In fact, when Ridley came in, if you think about it, having a British sensibility and not being political, he made it all about the guy next to you. When in effect, the actual operation was a colossal disaster. Right? It was a because I remember reading the book. They gave us the book before we did the film, and I read it. I'm like, how are they going to make this a positive? Right? Like, this is a disaster. Like, guys died. There were mistakes made, and Ridley came in, and the way that Ridley was very, very calm, and has a very analytical eye, and he said, you know what? I'm going to make it about the guy next to you, right? As for us, the guy next to us, and we all went into it with that. We just want to make a great film and be as good as we can be. And I think how different would that be today to get that made? And could you make a movie like that today? I mean, technically, you could make a movie like that, but would it be that movie? I don't think so.
No, half of them would be women.
Well, they'd have to do something, right? They'd have to put something in, or someone's having a sensitive moment where they're crying, or they're worried about this or that. They'd have to put something in there that was not true. And there's a reason why that movie, and I can tell you, and anyone on here that are army or military, they look at that movie as the quintessential movie that showed modern warfare, and it changed my life. So that. In addition to all the other things that were said on earlier about distribution, how would you distribute it? Where would it go? Who would it be marketed to? Would they give it the marketing that it needed to have in the way that it needed to have it? I don't know. I really don't know. I think, like you said, like 5 years ago, no, it wouldn't have. Terminalist has changed it, but Terminalist has changed it because Chris Pratt is a giant star, and what's his name, the writer, he's uncompromising. So I don't know.
We have a theme here. Marsden, Matthew. Sorry,
it's all right. People call me all kinds of things. Don't worry.
Okay, Matthew.
Mad Marsden.
Mad Mardigan. No, we have a theme here though today. Christopher Nolan was uncompromising, kept to his art. You're talking about the Terminalist writer. He's uncompromising. Well, when you look at One Piece on Netflix, which is one of the series that I love, Ichiro Oda, the creator, was uncompromising. He's like, if you want me to do this, I maintain creative control over the season and everything we produce. So could they make Black Hawk Down, Platoon? Let's wait 1 second because our other guest finally got here. She is a woman who was fired last year for exercising her free speech rights. She is embodies completely the never bow down, never bend the knee philosophy. Welcome to Carolyn. How are you doing, Carolyn?
Good. I'm sorry I'm late. I was fighting for democracy with Az and the Sunday Fun Day crew, and the match went a little bit longer than I had expected it to. But
not a problem. Did you hear what we were talking about?
A little bit. I just got in here. But I'm happy to.
Yeah, Matthew, you want to say what you were talking about?
It was just all great. I couldn't possibly recreate that. It was just amazing.
You can improv. You're an actor.
Yeah, let's show your skills.
No, I just think that when you look at something like the Terminalist, which shock horror, this happens all the time. I do want to tell you guys and give you a little bit of inside information. Just go back to the way that the way that Hollywood used to work, certainly when I first came here, because it gives you a little bit of an insight to the minds of the people that make things. So every year you'd have a pilot season, right, which would be around January through to March. Everyone would kind of descend on Los Angeles and try and get a pilot and do a pilot. And what was amazing about it was there were themes every year. So I remember when Grey's Anatomy I remember reading that going, oh, this is terrible, right? I remember reading the screenplay and going, I don't want to be a part of this. What do I know? But and it went on to be a massive success. But what they would do is all of a sudden there'd be 15 medical pilots going. And I'd be like, why are there all these medical shows? And then the next year it would be something else. And the next year it would be something else, all around the same themes, right? Like nobody had an original thought. The reason why I say that is they did it with faith films as well when The Passion came out. So The Passion came out and they went, oh, we can make money making Christian movies. And then realized that they didn't have the talent to do it. And you can't really manufacture those things and put them together the way we were talking about before. And so you look at the Terminalist and Reacher, and you look and you go, well, these have been massively successful. Why isn't there a slew of these films or these TV shows? Why hasn't that happened? And I think that we spoke a little bit earlier on about capitalism and about North Face and about the corporate, because at the end of the day, they've got to answer to their shareholders, right? Disney's got to answer to their shareholders. So they are in the business of making money. But for the first time in my career that I've seen is that there's always been a case, you know, you mentioned earlier, someone mentioned earlier, I'm not sure who said it, about making one good movie and then they know that there's a bunch that are going to fail, right? That we don't see those films. And that goes across the board, and it's always been the same. I think on different levels. But you have an instance now where they continue to put out big movies that continue to fail, and they know are going to fail. They have to, right? Because it's not just like they make them and then they just put them out there. They test them, right? They have people come in and look at them. They have experts. It's a whole industry. So why is it that they continue to put out stuff that is agenda-driven when they know that it's going to fail? I mean, it's plain that it's going to fail now. So there has to be something bigger, because
you do have the slightly corrupting influence. I mean, we're talking about, you know, capitalism and they're being ultimately accountable to shareholders, which is, I think, starting to be realized a little bit more by including companies like Disney. But you did have a large number of years this alternate model pushed, which is stakeholder capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And stakeholder capitalism is the system which was really devised by the people like Mark Carney, who was formerly head of the Bank of England and then went on to pioneer the spread of ESG finance around the world. And the idea of stakeholder capitalism is that actually you're ultimately responsible to broader social groupings more than, or at least alongside, your direct shareholders. So you have a duty to put this agenda in particular works, even if it contradicts your fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders, because your stakeholder responsibility is to do social good and to do governance good, whatever the hell those two things mean. Ultimately, like the test will come, and it's surprising in a way that it hasn't yet, but there's always this contradiction between your fiduciary duty and your social responsibility, and they try to sort of elide that distinction. But given, as you say, like so many of these things come out, so many of them bomb, and many of them bomb for pretty much the same reason, the conversation, I think, is starting to turn to, is it actually permissible to continue pushing your stakeholder responsibilities to the S in ESG when your ultimate responsibility legally is still to provide the maximum amount of return to your shareholders? That's going to be interesting to sort of see play out, certainly over the next few years, given that the record is pretty unambiguous at this point. You had a few, probably 3 or 4 years when you could just about make it tenable to say, well, actually, if you calculate it in a certain way, an ESG fund will outperform a non-ESG fund in terms of return over a 5-year period. But that's not really possible anymore. We've got too many of these things failing. Too much money has been lost by too many different people, all in the same cause. So hopefully, the people who ultimately matter are the people who obviously who have money on the mind. Hopefully, they will start to ask difficult questions, and it won't just be left to people on YouTube streams like us to say, "Why are you being so insane?"
Well, they are.
Sorry.
No, they are. If you look at the last 10K quarter filings of Disney, that was a problem that Nelson Peltz had pointed out, is like in the filings, they're actually saying you had Bob Iger, he attended that New York Times book of reviews, and he was saying, we got the message, we get it. We're going to get back to telling story, and stop pushing this message, this agenda. But in the 10K filing, they're informing the shareholder and future shareholders that, guess what? We're going to continue pushing our social, environmental message, and we may lose money because of it, but it's more important.
Well, I think that to your point, the earlier point is that the amazing thing about movies, and you couldn't do this, I don't think, with any other product, right? With movies, you can make one that can make $1 billion and save you, right? So especially if you're looking at Disney has actually traded on the goodwill. It's kind of like our sports teams, right? Like we kind of turn up to sports teams whether we suck or not, right? Like, for years and years and years, especially Red Sox fans would go and go and go and go. And they'd be like, we're crap this year. I know friends of mine that are Cubs fans are like, oh, we are just so bad. But they still go. And I think that Disney had that loyalty for so long, whether it be in the Star Wars franchise or the Marvel universe. And it got to such a point where they got so emboldened that they started attacking their fans. I think that that's probably the tipping point, right? That they went, well, hang on a minute, because people were still going and seeing these films and kind of holding their noses, like hoping, it's kind of like having this amazing what's the word I'm looking for? Like romanticism about the past.
Oh, yeah,
What I'm looking
Snow
for.
White, all that.
Nostalgia. You know,
Yeah.
you're nostalgic. I want to go and see and you can see it with what they did in the films. They're very crafty, right? Because they want to put in like the Millennium Falcon, and everyone goes, "Oh, the Millennium Falcon, the Millennium Falcon," and you go back to when you're like 10 years old playing with one of them, and now they can't do that anymore because there's almost like a new generation that's moved through, and we're kind of like, at my generation are kind of like, screw you, you've abused us for long enough, we're not coming. And by the way, we grew up on
the
good movies.
rose-colored glasses off.
Yeah.
The rose-tinted glasses. We've finally taken them off.
Yeah, we've also lost the potential. Like that's the other part too. To compare it to like the Chicago Cubs or the Boston Red Sox, there was always potential with every new start of their season, like when they were playing. With Disney, they've killed their potential because they're not bringing in people that get us excited to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's kind of harming it. The other part too is that you also have Bob Iger, who has been in charge of Disney for over a decade. So any ideas he brings in, they are not going to go away until he is gone, because Matthew will know this just as well as I do. When a new studio head comes in, if they haven't rolled film on a project that you're associated with, and they don't want it, that project is gone. Doesn't matter how much money has been spent, it's out. You don't have that at Disney because Bob Iger's been there all the time. Whether he's in the background while Chapek was doing his thing for a year or not, it was always going to be his doctrine, his ideas, and you're not going to get a change until he is gone, because he is the one that is lording over the studio, the parks, everything. It's his way or the highway, and that's just the nature of the Hollywood industry. And because he's been there so long, he has basically succumbed to the delusional point of view.
Egomaniacal guy? Yeah, come on.
Egomaniacal, but definitely delusional. Like I would say a lot of the stuff that he's doing to the Disney brand and to the Disney as a whole is definitely evil and maniacal, but he doesn't view it that way because he's delusional. And the people that are in with him on that are also delusional as well. They think the stuff that they're doing is going to be successful, and they acknowledge it will lose money, but they're thinking it's going to change the world because Disney changed the world. And it's not authentic.
It doesn't sell, Script. That's the point. Yeah. They're looking at Twitter and hashtag heroes on there going, "Whoa, we love you!" Except they don't buy tickets. There's not enough of them, and they've lost.
Yeah. And they spend 3 times more than what they need to make it. Like again, if they spent $60 to $90 million on the Marvels would have been a financial hit, even as it was released just last year.
Right.
But it wasn't. They spent around 2, maybe 3.
250, wasn't it? 250
something
plus.
Of that nature.
It was nuts.
When you cannot spend more money than what you intend to make back in distribution and sales of that product. That's just basic economic stuff here. But Marvel is still under the delusional aspect Disney is still under the delusional aspect that because it's a Marvel brand that they have built up, it is entitled to gain at least $1 billion at the box office. And they completely forget the only reason that they assume that entitlement is because they've actually earned that prior with the previous films leading up to that point. The moment you forget that you earn it, the moment that you forget that you have to earn respect with your customers is the moment you lose. And then the most pivotal aspect of story, it's not necessarily giving the audience what they want. It's presenting them with something so good that they never knew they needed it, because that's way more rewarding. Because when you give someone what they want, that's kind of disposable. But if you give something that they didn't expect they wanted before, they'll come back for more. And they'll entertain other pitches and other ideas that you might have, because they know, 1975, no kid ever cared or wanted Star Wars because they didn't know it existed yet. But when that came out in 77, every kid wanted Star Wars, right? That's how you're supposed to do story. That's how you're supposed to market things. If you listen to what the kids wanted for sci-fi in 1975, you would not get Star Wars at all. You'd get some sort of hokey single monster movie, B-movie horror thing that nobody would remember. It'd be like It's the Thing from Outer Space or something of that nature. You wouldn't have gotten Star Wars. But it's not saying like that was wrong. It's just saying like you have to present something in a manner and execute it in a way that makes people, when they see it for the first time, realize I needed this. And that makes perfect sense. That's how you make your money. That's how it worked with Marvel. Nobody wanted an Iron Man movie in 2008. It's the D-list characters, low risk. We're gonna spend a chunk of money to make it, but we think that when people see it, they're going to realize that they needed this all along. And they did that, and it proved to be true. And they took a shot. A lot of other movies do the same thing. They don't always succeed, but that's the goal behind it. Right now, Disney's not doing that. They're saying, well, we got the Marvel brand. It's entitled to make $1 billion at the box office. It doesn't matter what we put in there for. We don't even have to give them what we think they need. We're just going to tell them what they want because we've slapped the Marvel brand on it, and they will abide by that. And that is the fall of every single company that focuses on brand over substance.
Except there's one problem there, is the fact that Marvel did this before in their comics industry. They started to be successful, and then they followed the same pattern. The studio did it. They almost went bankrupt. I think they actually had to go through bankruptcy and reorganization.
They
So
did
all Marvel,
bankrupt, and they had to sell. They basically screwed up their licensing deal of all their characters by selling it to Hollywood to sustain themselves in the late 80s.
So now they're
that's why
repeating
all
the
the studios
mistakes.
have different Marvel characters.
Right, but now they're repeating the mistakes they in the studio that they made as a comic book company. That's the problem that doesn't make sense to most people every day when they're sitting there going, well, wait a minute, they did this before and now they're doing it again. Didn't they learn from the first go around?
Well, even on the comic side of things, I think it was a bit more. I mean, it was definitely oversaturation, but there were still good stories that were peppered in that area. With Disney, it's oversaturation, and you're hard pressed to find a good story that's post Endgame. Like that's the other part too, right? And don't get me wrong, when I was getting into the industry, lots of writers and producers were trying to do what Marvel is doing today, which is like, hey, wouldn't it be great if we had a couple of television shows that fed into an annual feature film showcase event, and it was all connected to one universe, because we could really do some vertical integration, some great marketing, tell some authentically fun stories. But every producer's like, well, number one, it's too expensive, and number two, when are you going to be able to? Where's the scarcity to it, right? Like things are more valuable when they're scarce. That's why you shouldn't really have multiple Marvel movies a year, because when you don't have the scarcity, people are dependent on it, they get docile to it. It gets washed over. That doesn't resonate as much anymore because it's no longer an event. When you change it from annually to quarterly, it's now just, oh, well, that's the thing that's happening on this day. It's like no difference than going to the comedy club on Saturday night. You always know there's going to be a performer playing there, but you're not really too excited for it if it's going to be the same 6 people every Saturday. You need a little bit of variety. You need also a little bit of scarcity, and you also need to change up things in your life as well. And that variety and that lack of variety and that lack of scarcity comes from the fatigue side of Hollywood, where if they're trying to keep on putting out Marvel movies or superhero movies or big budget tentpole films, and they're just constantly doing it over and over again, the quality is going to diminish, because you can't ask of creative people and even not so creative people to constantly keep on pumping that out, because the quality is going to diminish just by default. If you don't give them a rest time, if you don't allow them to change, get a palate cleanser, or change the type of thing that they're doing, they're always just going to be stuck doing the same derivative works. And then we as the audience are going to get sick and tired of it too, because if they're not going to put in the effort to make it fresh and exciting, we're not going to be able to see it for being fresh and exciting, and we're going to get tired of it. We're going to go look for something else. We're going to go to
we have. Think about it. 24 months. Think about it. In 24 months, Disney has destroyed Willow, Indiana Jones, Star Wars completely, and Marvel has gone down the tubes.
Well, technically, they saved Willow because they deleted that Willow show from existence. It's no longer canon, so Willow is still technically untouched.
Willow was hilarious. I will not stand for this slander against Willow. It's one of the funniest TV shows I've ever seen. Really, without meaning to be, but you also have, just sort of going off of what was just said, I mean, you've got sort of the triple corrupting influence of the launch of streaming services during a global pandemic, during a time when immense amounts of free money were being printed and thrown at anyone who could claim to have any use for it at all. And when you've got, a streaming service running like Disney, which is already being skewed because obviously streaming numbers boom during a lockdown because everyone's locked in at home, and business people are fundamentally idiots. Somehow they get to their positions of power, but they're not very clever people. So they assume, and the same thing is true of video games as well, they assume that this newly inflated number is just going to keep increasing in perpetuity. It's not a lockdown phenomenon. It's just, hey, it's the new normal now. Everyone can watch as much as they want, whenever they want, and our numbers will continue growing, so keep investing for us, please. And in reward, we will keep churning out content in order that we can populate this streaming service, and we can beat off all the competition from all of the other people who've had exactly the same idea. And so you have a huge amount of Marvel content in particular, and Star Wars content on the television side, which comes out for no other reason than that they can say, hey, look, Disney Plus has all of the Marvel stuff. It has all of the Star Wars stuff. You should definitely subscribe to us. You ask them why they're actually making the shows on an artistic level, and they have absolutely no answer. Did we need the Obi-Wan Kenobi show? No, we absolutely didn't. Was it very good? Also, no, it absolutely wasn't. Same thing with Moon Knight or She-Hulk, all of these various different things, which have really no reason to be, except that they want to be able to boast and advertise that they have the latest content stuff. They've just lost completely touch with any conception of quality. It's just about quantity in order to win the streaming wars, which of course has doomed them in the streaming wars because there's nothing worth subscribing for anymore.
Here. Well, it did doom them. I think one of the problems was they've fallen into the same trap that cable did. I mean, there was a time when you had 300 channels. Everybody knows that, but you maybe have watched 7 to 10. but you had to pay for all the others, right, Brian? You pay for all.
Yeah, it was always a package. It was like, hey, you want this and this? Well, you gotta get this, and about 14 channels and 3 of them aren't in your language. Good luck.
It's like some guy who's like knitting on for art, kind of like in the American Society of Magical Negroes. But the point is like CNN and MSNBC would not be on the air today if they were based off of ratings. We have YouTube channels, who have bigger viewerships than most CNN primetime shows.
Yep.
But they did that because cable was, to me, I viewed it almost like this socialist system. We're like, okay, you got to pay these people as part of the package, the contracts they cut. Then streaming comes along, and I looked at it as, like, maybe this is more merit based. You know, you go to a streaming package, let's say like Netflix. They put out something good, you keep it. They put out something crap, you cancel it this month and come back later, and you could do the same thing. And I think Hollywood got lazy in between, saying we can just keep feeding them dog food all day long. They'll keep paying for it. People are like, nope.
People got to take the time to waterfall their accounts. Get a service like privacy.com or something, and just literally waterfall your accounts. Like, only sign up for a month when you think there's something there you want to watch, and then disconnect and come back a couple months later. Like, only reward them for the content you're watching. You know, I mean, it's hard to do, but
let me just say this about creatives, because I mean, every single point on the that you guys have said is absolutely brilliant. I mean, it just shows you how complicated this issue is, even though it's simple to actually resolve it, and which is start by making really good content, right? It's a good start.
Right.
But if you look at, we mentioned Star Wars, we mentioned Indiana Jones. So if you look at the Lucasfilm movies, and then you look at the Marvel movies, they both have something in common. The creators lost control of their creations, right? So George Lucas let it go. Stan Lee, I know there's a whole complicated thing with Stan Lee over the years, but all of a sudden the people that were actually making, that were really invested, that really loved those characters, that created them, were no longer part of it. So other people kind of pick them up. And a lot of times, you know, we're seeing this, and this is kind of a separate point, how, you know, I think I told you guys before about when I had interviewed or spoke to Doug Gresham, as C.S. Lewis's son, and he spoke about how the studio, when they were going to buy, I don't know which studio it was, but when they were going to buy the Chronicles of Narnia, they were going to set the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe in modern day LA, right? Because they're much more smarter than C.S. Lewis.
What?
Right? They're way more smarter, right?
What? Stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life.
No, it's true, and I'll tell you that story some other time. But the fact of the matter is, it's kind of like if you look at really great bands, the great bands come back and they make album after album after album after album. Like U2 makes album, and they somehow manage to come back and tap into that creativity and make something great more than once. Right? A lot of bands come out, they make one album and that's it, and it's fantastic. And then everything that comes after is no good. Why? Because they lose the hunger, right? They don't feel like it's necessary to create the art anymore. And this is really super important, because if you look at the decision makers, whether it be at, mainly at Disney, when you are worth 150, 200, 300, 400 million dollars, what is getting you out of bed in the morning?
Passion would be the only thing I would think. If you don't have that, nothing else.
Okay. So what is the motivator? Because if you personally aren't going to suffer from it, like Iger is not going to personally suffer from Disney's, he will from Disney stocks tanking, right? Because he's obviously got stock options.
Yeah.
But
you don't think it hurts his ego? Like humiliation? I thought that was a big thing
because
in
at the parties,
I don't think he cares
he
anymore.
gets told how great he is.
Yeah.
And he was the one that, because he look, when you're building a company, you've either got to come up with a product that is unique, that is going to sell a ton of things, or if you want to expand a company, you have to purchase, right? And that's what Disney did. They bought Fox, they bought Marvel, and they got Lucasfilm, right? So he presided over that. So he's done it, right? I mean, he's been a success. And so you have to look at every aspect of this and also see what is driving this. Like, what is the intention? Like, everyone on this call is like, we want to make the best product possible, right? We want to be as good as we can be, and it doesn't matter how much money that come in. I mean, you know, for me personally, and I know there's other people on here that have lost a ton of money because we won't compromise, because that is not the driving force, right? It can't be, because eventually you're going to fail on every aspect of your life, right? Because you're not being true to yourself. You can be true to yourself and be wrong and then go, I was wrong. But there's nothing worse than selling out. And then
nothing worse.
You know what I'm saying? So what we have is, at least George Lucas, and look, I know that a lot of people were not happy with the second, it was called the second three, right? The second group of three that came out. But you can't deny that he really cared. I mean, he might have been wrong, but he cared. And then you see what happens after that. And now it's like, what is it like? Create product so we can consume more product, or whatever. Is like we've moved so far away from that, and it seems to me like people are caring about all the wrong things, right? They're not like, we're all talking about the art, actually, and art doesn't have to be detached from making money,
right? No.
Right? I mean, you can make a beautiful car. A beautiful car is going to sell. You know, make a beautiful picture, a beautiful painting is going to sell. You want to buy a nice house, you want your house to look good, right? So these things are not detached from each other, and it seems like what is going on at the moment is there is this detachment, and what they're doing is they're putting the DEI kind of the social justice element in, instead of saying, do the best that you can be, write the best stories, make the best movies, get the best people for the job in those roles, so we can create something that is transcendent. I mean, that even if, and I'm a big believer of, you know, I wish that there was an award ceremony for, you know, cheesy action movies, because I love them. I don't know about you. I've been in a couple of them, and I love them. There's nothing wrong with sitting down and putting on a good action movie. I mean, I just watched all the Mission Impossible films. I love them.
Oh, God, yeah. Those are great.
Them.
No politics, no woke, just straight action. Good popcorn fun.
So, you know, we don't have that right now. We have people that have made so much money that they don't care. Like, failure to them doesn't really matter, because, you know, in their own mind, they can turn around and go, I made Avengers Infinity War. It's the biggest movie of all time. Like, what are you going to say to me? You know, and they're off, you know, doing other things, you know. So I think that people wanting excellence and coming back to excellence is absolutely vital for the movie industry to survive. And then, you know, in conjunction with all the other things that you've spoken about, distribution and all those other elements need to come together. And I think that the first, I keep saying this on social media, the first studio that does this is going to make bank. Like, they are going to absolutely destroy everybody. And it's not the ones that are out there right now, right? They are not making, and I think you know what I mean. Like, there's certain elements that other people that are coming out, or the new studios are popping up. They are not the ones that are going to move the needle. Right,
A24 is getting pretty close. I haven't seen Civil War yet, but so far everything they've done is.
Yeah, but you know, people will just point to like one and say, "Well, there needs to be multiple." I mean, look, if you know, you listed what Sony, the Sony, MGM, Universal, Warner Brothers, Disney. That, you know, there's a bunch, and all you need is for it to go off course by like 1 degree, and then it's going to be a disaster. But, you know, I'm not so much talking about them as a couple of other studios that whenever I post and I go, we need to make great content, they'll go, well, they just put out this movie. And I'm like, do you really think it's good? I mean, is it really that good? Is it as good as Oppenheimer? No. And stop pointing to the one hit, right? Because you guys know, and anyone in here that's pitched movies, what I never do is talk about my dog Skip. Right, the one movie that built and built and built and built, because it's an anomaly, right? God's Not Dead is an anomaly, right? Like, these movies that have made a lot of money, people always point to the one that for some reason or another, and it's not necessarily because it's a good movie, right? Made a ton of money, right? It has to be an ideology that you go in, that you say, we've got to make the best possible content, right? And we've got to get the best possible people involved. And if you build it, everyone's gonna gravitate to it, because that's what we all want, right? At the end
build
of the
it
day.
and they'll come. Yeah, build it and they will come.
Well, it's the old reputational game, because when you're dealing with the studio executives at their level, money is not as important as the reputation. How well does it perform? The thing is that where there's the reputation in the days when I started, which was a few years after Matthew here, was basically like, wow, we had a popular movie. Will it win an award? Who cares? It was a popular movie. Can you do a movie that's being talked about as often as mine is? Come on, go for it. Do it. And the thing is, the competition was there where they're like, man, I love that movie. I want to make something that is as good as that, if not better. And they were always measuring themselves among the best that was out there. But now, I mean, and this is also a big stipulation when it comes to people entering into the industry, or people that want to enter into the industry. They don't rate themselves against the best that's out there. They rate themselves against the worst. They're like, if I can do better than that piece of crap, I deserve to be in Hollywood. No, you don't. Turn around, go back to the drawing board, rewrite, come back with something that's great, because that's not how you actually break into this industry. That's not how you make yourself valuable. And that's not how you play the reputation game. Right now, the reputation isn't with the audience anymore. It's with whomever is doing the background financing of certain things, or gearing certain directions or ideologies within the studio system. It's about appeasing them for those parties, as opposed to going down, on Santa Monica Boulevard at the restaurant during lunch and shooting the breeze with a bunch of studios and being like, you know what? We just made The Godfather. It's a hit right now. What do you got next on the docket? Oh, I'm working on Apocalypse Now. It's going to be a couple of years, but it's going to be phenomenal. Really? I don't know about that. Let's put a bet on that. There's none of that going on anymore. And that's the problem. You need to get back to that thing where it's not about just appeasing the inner crowd. It's about basically having a reputation with each other to see how much we can get the general audience to love you. And
how are you going to get their trust back? That's the thing. Hollywood has lost the trust of the audience.
It can always be re-earned, but it's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to be, you're going to have one movie that's pretty decent, doesn't make a huge amount of money, but people keep talking about it. Oppenheimer is a great barometer for that. You get 2 or 3 more over the next.
I loved Hangover. I love The Holdovers. There was a lot of great movies last year. It was much different than 2022.
2022 sucked.
Yeah, no, it's 20. But then you get this pops up. The American Society of Magical Negroes. You don't want to join it. That's NPR, right? This is, just so you know, this is from NPR. Where is that damn link? There we go. That's NPR attacking it, going, you don't
I feel bad for Dag, man. He's a great actor.
Yeah, David Allen Greer is fantastic.
He's awesome.
And the disappointing, I haven't seen the movie yet, but I have heard that it doesn't lean into the trope in a comedic way properly. It basically is afraid of its own premise, which is terrible, because if I got an open writing assignment saying, hey, can you do this thing? I'm like, number one, does it have to be that title? Because I can come up with probably a couple of different ones that are a bit better. Number two, how many tropes can I exploit, and how much fun can I have with it? What's the threshold there? Because again, you always have to negotiate with that aspect, because sometimes, listen, when you're dealing with comedy and dealing with satire or any type of farce, there is a threshold where you can actually go over the line and you basically gilded the lily. And you don't want to do that. So you want to have a good, barometer there. You want to be able to play around with it, and you want to get, the best talent. If you got someone like David Allen Greer in there, I'm pretty sure you would have had a dozen of fantastic ideas to actually have more fun with that premise than what the current creative team
let
had.
him cook. It's clear they clearly didn't let him cook. They probably tried to stifle him, because he can carry that entire movie on his own. He
could. I agree, Brian. But the problem is like Script Doctor was saying, it's like, how I think of it is American Society of Magical Negroes is an edgy title in search of a better movie. It was nothing else. It's like they didn't go where they wanted to go. They didn't allow anyone to be. All you get is a lot of imagery, a lot of symbolism. You get kind of like this Gen Z My Truth manifesto from a whiny soy boy about black good, white bad, and that's how it's always going to be. I mean, there was a question in the movie where they actually explain the origin of their magic. It comes back from the slave days. And I'm sitting there going, whoa. So they got magic, this collective magic as slaves. But instead of teleporting their ass out of there, which they could do, they're like, nope, we're going to stay on the plantation and we're going to make sure white people are comfortable. I'm like,
see, when you explain that to me, I see a joke where it's like the only way that powers their magic is for them to be oppressed.
Right.
And that's a joke they have to play into.
That would have been a great joke.
If they start getting equality, they're like, oh crap, we're losing our magic. Then you have satire. But you don't have anyone with the balls to do that.
They're too afraid to make fun of themselves.
Yeah.
I guarantee you, Dag would have done it if they would have let Dag do his thing. And I bet you sitting there thinking about all the jokes he can tell, but he wants to keep his job, so he's sitting there with his stupid script, and he's not having to work. Some of the best stuff that, like in Living Color and all these other amazing comedic from the past, it was all them riffing on a concept that is sort of silly, but in that riff they make comedy, true comedy gold, classic comedy gold.
It is, but comedy requires honesty to be funny. Satire requires truth. You can't have it unless you're honest. And today, one of the biggest problems is what's gotten us into problems culturally is people selling a lie, being dishonest. Platoon, what do you think about it, the movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big problems with comedy is that it works very well when it's oppositional. So when you have long periods of time when the balance of political and cultural power is generally with the right or the center or conservatives, whenever it's, in other words, not very, very left-wing as a predominant cultural trend, then you have pretty good comedy because they are satirizing something they fundamentally don't agree with. And it's easy to do that as a comic because then you're not really sacrificing your own reputation. You're not risking your own friend groups. You're not going against your own interests because everyone around you agrees that this is a bad thing. And so we can take the piss out of it. And you can actually have some really good left-wing comedy that comes out of that period of time. So United Kingdom under Tony Blair, who was usually considered to be at least a centrist kind of Labour leader, you had comedy like The Thick of It, which comes out, which is by Armando Iannucci, who is quite a left-wing comic. But he was able to satirize Blairite-style politics because he fundamentally doesn't really agree with it. The problem at the moment is that a lot of comedy writers and satirists would have to be satirizing their own side because their own side has effectively the balance of power and culture. And no one really likes doing that. You can pick very easy targets, which is why you have so many really cheap and awful attempts at parodying Donald Trump, for example, which doesn't work because they don't really understand it because he's just such a comically bad person to them that there's no subtlety there. So they can't really be clever, and they don't have to be either. They just have to point out and say, Orange Man, bad, laugh, please, and everyone claps. And that's what comedy has become. So, one of the best things that could probably happen to comedy is if the actual balance of power shifts back to the right again, because left-wing people can make really good comedians. It's just they can't be in power while they're doing it, which at the moment they are. So, but something like, I've not seen the American Society of Magical Negroes yet. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing it just to see what it does. But I would get the impression from that is that they can't actually take the piss out of the obvious targets because they fundamentally agree with the propositions they'd have to be satirizing.
They do. Basically, you have a clean Los Angeles. And first of all, imagine they shot the whole thing of a clean Los Angeles where there's no reparation rates going to Nordstrom's and Apple. There's no fentanyl ghouls.
Have you been to LA?
Hell yeah. There's
my God.
There's no homo.
Very amused earlier with the suggestion that you could set Narnia in LA, but the obvious comedic way of doing that is you walk down the street and you step on a needle and you trip your way into Narnia. Like that's a fairly fun way of getting there.
You have to trip over dirty mattresses and a guy selling oranges from his fentanyl tent into a Narnia pit.
Or you have the Summer of Love, and you have the kids basically hiding in, a closet in like a Nordstrom's, as you said, or some sort of furniture store, and that's into Narnia to get away from the riots. But
dude, I've been working in LA for like 15 years, and it started about 15 years ago. It started to get really bad, and it never got not a single year it got better. Somehow during COVID it got worse. It was just daily dragged, homeless, trash. Nothing ever got cleaned up. I don't know what they're spending their money on, but you can't go down Alameda without having to dodge trash in the road. It's insane.
You need to get out, brother.
I did. I got out. By the way, here's the thing about comedy as well. Here's the thing about comedy. You have to be able to laugh at yourself, right? Yeah. You have to be able to look at your shortcomings and find them amusing, right? And what we've seen in a lot of these movies is the girl boss, right? Like the girl boss that is absolutely, and actually guys as well, but mainly with females, that they don't have any obstacles to overcome in the screenplays, right? So they're perfect. So how can you have comedy, right, when you're perfect, when you are God? When you are God, you can't look at any faults in yourself because that is fatal to you. And this is this is all across entertainment at the moment. Like nobody's able, like we know as people, right? As you go through pain, you get stronger. It's not pleasant, right? And we all know that we would rather not be in it, but that doesn't mean that it's not beneficial for us. And I think that if you look at certainly Chappelle, I keep talking about him because I think he's just the absolute gold standard.
Yeah, he is.
Is he pokes fun at everyone, including himself. He takes absolutely no prisoners, and I think that is vital for comedy. And that's what, when I heard the name, I was actually in a theater. I can't remember what I was watching, and the trailer came up for that movie, and I'm like, oh, they could never, like, whatever the title is, they could never make the title of that film. They could never make the film that goes with that title, ever, because they're not willing to go there. They're not willing to offend. And even if the filmmakers wanted to, again, you guys know the process. They do the first edit of the film, or let's say they even get past like getting a script that was remotely offensive, right? And then it gets made. Well, then you got to get past all the actors that are going to be like, well, I don't know if this is going to be good for my career. Can I change that line? Can I change that line? Can we do it like this? And then before you know it, if you don't have a strong enough director, you're making a different movie. And let's just say they did act the screenplay all the way through the way it was. Then you're going to detest screenings, or you're going to put it in front of a bunch of studio executives that are like, they're going to say I'm racist. I'm going to get fired. This is it. It's over. So you got multiple layers of fear, right? Which I think the little Platoon was saying that before. You have to have someone that's out there that's going, I'm going to take it all on myself, and we're going to make this film, and we're going to push it all the way through. And that's the only way you can make it. But Hollywood is making movies from a position of fear and with no creativity. And that is a disaster, right?
Well, they need
you
balls.
Cannot make them like that. You can't.
Yeah,
no,
they need
they've
courage.
they've had fear basically driven out their humility, because it doesn't matter what political party is in power. If they don't have humility, you will never get anything good out of it. One of the things that occurred in the 80s, especially during the Reagan and Bush years, is that some of them felt so serious that they were very easy to make fun of in the 80s. But then they started, in the 90s, they started being a bit more, humble. I mean, I remember when George Bush Sr. went on Saturday Night Live to have fun with Dana Carvey doing that towards the end of his term. That actually helped him out. And that actually kind of broke down things here. What we've been having over at least the last 20 years is that it doesn't matter who's in office, they really don't want to be made fun of. And that is like completely that is basically the sign of a bad leader, because if they don't have a little bit of humility and an understanding of responsibility, doesn't matter if you're left or right or centrist, you're not going to actually you're not going to hand over control to those that are going to be criticizing of you. You're not going to be able to entertain conflict of ideas or anything of that nature, because you take yourself far too seriously to have fun with anything. And in Hollywood, the entire idea of entertainment is to have fun, to share an experience, to provide an emotional reaction, ideally positive, but sometimes you have something more dramatic, that's small scale, where you want to really, tug on the heartstrings of people. And because sometimes you just need a romantic comedy, or you need a tragedy that just makes you appreciate what you have for yourself. And those movies are important, but you can't do that if you keep on taking yourself way too seriously all the time. And for this type of magical movie here, it's clearly a premise where they took themselves way too seriously and forgot to have fun with the joke and the concept. And when you can't entertain the idea of having fun, you don't have comedy. And we have been devoid of legitimately good comedies for that reason. And then the second reason, which is the fact that unfortunately comedies are horrible. But comedies are a domestic product. They're for your local audience. They're not supposed to be done internationally. And Hollywood is all about the international box office right now. And that's why it's really hard to do a comedy, because to Matthew's point, in 2011, I had that exact same thing. I wrote a period piece script in the 1970s, and I had a lot of people from different ethnicities read the script and be like, I don't know if I can say this, or I don't know if I can want to do that. And it's like, well, then I don't want to work with you. And we found the people that want to work with us. They all loved the project. When we pitched it out, people really dug it. And then 2012 hit, and then things kind of went weirdly, and then things started to escalate, and then that got shelved because people got afraid. They like, we don't want to have fun with this really simple comedy that is mocking aspects of the 1970s that actually happened and is humiliating a lot of people all around. nope, we're not going to do that. And that's when I started to notice it. And then it just kind of grew and a snowball effect once you got to 2016. And then you'll probably notice a lot of people that were kind of on the rise up until 2016 suddenly became silent or vanished post 2017. Why was that? Why was all this potential talent that was really good, that should have broke through and revolutionized Hollywood for that generation, vanish? Well, because a certain person got into office, and because those people who may or may not have voted for them reflected or physically looked similar to that person in office, they were then pushed out, and then we brought in all these other people, and we just ground our wheels to a halt where nothing could be funny without it being offensive, nothing could be adventurous without it being diverse, and nothing could be entertaining without it being lectures.
So basically, they lost their balls along with embracing an ideology. Now, we got a surprise guest for the last part of our show. So before we get there, I'm going to read some super chats, then we're going to bring them right in. Fletcher, bring up the super chats, what we have incoming, so we can. There we go. Jim Alaska, how you doing? Hope everybody's doing well over there. Gifted 20 Georgia Giant Slayer memberships. Thank you, Jim. 20. You and Buttcrack Media are leading the way. Thank you. We got Tender Warrior 68. He gifted 10 Georgia Giant Slayer memberships. Tender Warrior. I'm going to see you at that panel. Thank you, my friend. Paulus Plus for 100. Is that North Korean? No, not North Korean. What am I talking about? That's Norwegian.
No, those are the Norwegian krona.
Norwegian krona. I was reading an article this morning about North
Koreans don't have enough currency to super chat. I'm sorry.
I know. I was sitting here. It's North Korea was stuck in my head. Yeah. Hello, the script doctor with love from Norway. Sweet Bay being detected. 294,411 curator followers. Dudes. Okay, I guess that's for script. Then we have Skiz Spivak Esquire for 28 Canadian dollars. Hail, Slayer Nation. Just got here. Greetings, George. An amazing guest. Hail to you, Skiz. Thank you for that. Man of War 665. Don't be a Denethor. Never abandon your posts. ESG DEI is slinking back under the stairs for a PR rebrand, only to rear its head under a new moniker. We're not going to let it happen. That's why we keep spotlighting it, Man of War. And now we got a guy who mixes the law with laughs, and he makes his courtroom jargon sound like a punchline. He is a New York attorney who's got wit just like a stand-up comedian and all the wisdom of a seasoned judge. Welcome, the impressive Joe from Good Logic.
Wow, that was the greatest intro I ever got before in my life. Thank you, George. I am totally clipping that. That was amazing.
Okay. Welcome.
So great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here the first time. We were just talking about you caught us. We were just talking about the American Society of Magical Negroes and how Hollywood has pretty much kind of like lost its balls. You know, there was one scene in the film, which I think everybody has probably at one point seen because of the trailer, where you have the gentleman who's recruiting, I think it's Aaron or Jay. He's got him in front of a great white shark. The simile, he's like, you know what the most dangerous animal is? He's like, the shark. He's like, white people. And now imagine, what would Hollywood do if we flipped the script? If we said, you know, the American Society of Magical Honkies. I mean,
magical crackers. And
they were to turn around and say, you know, what's the most dangerous animal on the planet? I guarantee you that BLM would be outside of that producer's door. House.
Oh, yeah. Or it'd be funny if they just said white people in that as well, because that's also even funnier. Like the American Society of Natural White People. It's like, we know what the most dangerous animal is. What? White people. What? Really? Us?
I mean, he basically says at the end of the movie, because there's a premise where, like, these guys had, you know, he recruits them and they have this white terror meter. I was stunned. I mean, everything. And so whenever he's helping white people, like, he can see their stress level, where they're at. But, you know, if he doesn't pay attention to his client, he's going to lose his client. And if he loses his client, they're supposed to wipe his mind and take his magic. So the end of the movie comes, they don't do any of that. And he says, no worries, our magical society will always be around because there will always be white people. I'm like, it's just one.
George, this is creating such an opportunity for you. I saw, I'm serious. I'm really serious. I saw a movie clip once where this person was showing, it was a 20-minute video I saw. I'm sure if you search YouTube for 30 seconds, you can find it, where they were showing how Harry Potter, depending on how you clip it and set the music, It could be a horror movie. It could be a suspense thriller. It could be any of those things. And you can take every one of these movies that are meant to be action movies or serious, like whatever, and just turn them into comedies by adding like a laugh track here and like a different thing. They'll show a clip where some woman is like, beating the crap out of a man, and you have a laugh track behind it, and it changes the entire context, as the entire feel of the movie.
Dude, I saw that on YouTube, A Big Bang Theory. Someone took 3 or 4 episodes and just removed the laugh track, and it was so sad. It was the saddest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It was depressing.
Yeah.
I mean, you actually feel sorry for whatever the main character is, Sheldon, the whole time, because he would make a joke or say, everyone would just look at him. No one's laughing, and it's like it was unintentionally hilarious. But
don't you think there could be a YouTube channel which would explode by just doing that, by taking a movie that's supposed to be like very serious and like adding a laugh track to it?
I wish it'd be copyright claim to hell, my friend.
Yeah,
as someone who makes videos, long form videos about movies and TV, I spend 2 days before releasing a video just fighting copyright claims.
Clearing copyright, yeah.
It's crazy.
So with
That's
that,
a great idea, though. Maybe a Rumble channel.
No, on Rumble it could work. Now with that, we also have the continuation of Gamergate. I don't know. I felt this week was, cancel culture, racism week, just like everything at its point. So, Kara, what do you think about what's going on with Sweet Baby Inc. and like this next wave?
I am just so glad people are finally starting to point this stuff out, because I mean, it's been pretty obvious in the gaming industry for the last decade or so that things are definitely being controlled by a certain mindset. And I mean, we've seen it just kind of little by little as is what's going on in the movie industry. And so it's been very nice to just see people finally, at least people with the audience or people with the louder voices that are calling it out, because I mean, a lot of us have said it for years, but it just takes a couple of people with big audiences and similar mindsets. They may not even agree on everything, but they at least see that there is a common denominator with a certain industry failing. And so I'm liking seeing that they're finally getting called out. And
do you think?
I really hope it makes a difference.
Well, because of your background, I really wanted to get your insight. Do you think this has more power now because of everything that happened in Hollywood, or anybody else? This is open to everyone. Because of the last few years of this Hollywood woke, this incessant thing with the films that they put out or their entertainment or television shows, that people kind of already were woken up to that. Now that it's happening, now they're realizing in gaming, there are bigger forces at play to push it back.
A problem with it just like in the entertainment industry, any entertainment, a lot of the big dogs, it's all a bubble. It's all an echo chamber, and they're all so afraid of each other, or they're all so focused on like sucking up to one particular big guy because they think it's going to advance them, that they are absolutely not willing to either voice their opinion or do anything that could possibly put them in bad graces with a person or studio or group. And a lot of people in like the devs, I'm hoping that they wake up to what the audience is actually saying. Like there are a few of us that are kind of hidden in the industry, in the publishers and the developers, that I mean, it's very, I wouldn't say it's completely toxic, but it is very obvious where a lot of the studios kind of lean. But they won't even, a lot of them won't even outwardly say it, but they'll shame you if you even make a comment that is even remotely opposite of what they tend to go for. I mean, I had one instance, it was election day, I think it was like 2 years ago, in the Slack for work, it was just like, don't vote for Nazis.
Oh, okay.
I was just like, come on, like,
Okay,
and
I won't.
Easy, they're not running for office.
Obviously, no, they were
be pretty easy.
seriously,
I haven't seen any
obviously,
Nazis
but
around.
it was obviously geared towards anybody that had like Republican next to their name, or like it was very obvious. And I was like, like, I was talking to somebody else in my office, and they're like, "Don't say it. Don't speak your mind. It's not going to matter."
And
I actually had a guy because like I work in games as well, and like I actually had a guy the first week. I think I announced that I was because I working with Ken Levine on Judas. The first week, I think, when I'd said I'm now involved in this writing project, I had a guy I can't name, but from a different studio. I think he was involved with one of the Portal games. Get in touch just to speak because he was just wondering how somebody who has like I don't really advertise my politics and I don't particularly think of them as right wing, but wondering how somebody who wasn't very far left ever got hired into that industry because he's an underground conservative and doesn't think that he has the freedom or the ability to start talking honestly and openly in his workplace about the things he believes. Not that they're particularly extreme, it's just that it's moved so far in one direction that anybody who used to be a centrist, for example, is now completely caught out and kind of living in a bit of fear. You're right. Like there is this quite predominant mindset. So in some studios more than others, it must be said. Like I've been very lucky in the studio that I work for, in that that's not prevalent at all. We're just concerned with writing a good story and making a good game and putting that out there, and we're kind of avoiding all of this particular conversation. But certainly in other studios, and the ones that seem to be more inclined to take on companies like Sweet Baby Inc. to do their narrative revisions for them, you can imagine, being anything except quite far left in the workroom is going to be hard for you because they kind of the natural assumption that Republican equals Nazi is not an uncommon one.
I know, but it's gotten old. I mean, it's like I used to consider myself a centrist with a little bit of a bent more towards conservatism. But like last week, after I put my Disney video out, I got my first death threat for YouTube. And they were like, "You're a Nazi pig." And I was like, "Hey," I called up Gary and I was like, "Gary,
first time?"
Yeah. He's like, "Welcome to the club." Yeah. He's like, "Did they call you an alt-right?" I'm like, yeah, they did.
I got a death threat for saying I don't like Star Trek.
Yeah, well, because
I got death threats for saying I didn't want dudes in my bathroom.
Define dude, Caroline. Like you can't even do that anymore.
What is a dude?
A biological male who's playing dress up as a female.
Right. That's a problematic speech.
But part of
how dare I?
Part of the whole issue with everything that's going on right now, which is both encouraging and kind of like worrying, is that I'd imagine that everyone on here would just get on with their lives, right? Like people just get on with their lives. And then someone will say something that you might be identified with that particular group, right? But they make a sweeping statement, right? Like you're saying like, "Oh, they're all Nazis." Well, hang on a minute. There's a lot of people, and this is certainly what I would hear in Hollywood. I'd hear, "Those guys, they're all bad," and this. And I'm like, well, hang on a second. That's not my experience. And so you have to ask yourself at that moment, is this the moment that I confront lies or not? And I think a lot of people have chosen not to do that. Well, that emboldens people to push it more and more and more and lie and push it. And so what was really amazing was I ended up going to like a Comic-Con with the Friday Night Tights guys, and I walked in. I'd never been to one before, and there were all these people there that absolutely loved Lord of the Rings. They loved all these different, manga and this and that. And I saw them, and of course, I mean, I've been in a couple of genre films. I'm very appreciative of anyone that will go and watch a film, right? I'm not going to tell them, that I don't like them, certainly, because I'm not stupid and I'm not rude. But I went there, and what you see is a bunch of people that truly, truly care about this material. And they've been just told that they're bad people and that they're racist because they love the characters that were beautifully crafted by a genius when you're looking at Tolkien, right? And so all of a sudden, because someone else isn't making a good enough product and they're getting called on it, all of a sudden the people that are calling on it, the people that actually care about the material, are being called all these names, right? And I think that happens. It's happening in gaming. right? You know, if you want to stand up and say, hang on a second, you know, we want better stories, or we don't want the characters to be X, Y, or Z, then you start getting called names. Well, this is a wake-up call, because it's going to happen to everybody in every single aspect of your life. If you go against the Borg, they're going to start yelling at you. And I think that fair-minded people now, like you say, George, people that were just centrists now are going, hang on a second, to them, you know, there's that little, is it a meme where, like, you know, it's where I was the right and the left and you're in the middle, and then it just moved and moved and moved. I mean, that's where it is, right? Like, I never wanted to talk about politics. I never did. It's just that they wouldn't leave us alone. I mean, that's where it is. They will not leave us alone. So what do? Are you either one of the, like the group on here that go, hang on a second, I'm done with this because this is not right.
And if they're not talking directly at you, they're taking shots at people with similar opinions that you hold.
Exactly.
Even if they're not directly attacking you, they are making you feel belittled and inhuman just because you have any similarities to somebody that, I mean, anybody at all. It doesn't matter how big or how small.
Yeah, I mean, if you, there's a bunch of people. Let's just say, if you look at, let's just talk politics for a second. If you look right now and you say the border is the most important policy for me and I need it to be shut, and that is a one-issue voter. Like, I know people that have other things that are their one-issue voters, you know, about. They'll choose their candidate on one issue. Does that mean you agree with every other thing that candidate is saying? No,
of course,
no. And we all know that, right? We all know that, but you all of a sudden, as you said, Caroline, is you get immediately shoved and demonized and get called all these names, and it's completely unfair. You know, I mean, I'll say this: why is it in this day and age that we can go to Starbucks and order a triple foam latte, soy latte, oat milk latte with, you know, whatever it might be? Nobody bats an eyelid. Right. But if you say, well, I'm a little bit nuanced on my politics because I don't really believe in this, but I really believe, no, you're all in or you're nothing. Right. It's everything or nothing. You're like, well, actually, life isn't like that. Right. There's a lot of
and
gray.
that's why people are going after J.K. Rowling right now.
Yeah,
She's
exactly.
against that one particular stance. And she's very leftist.
Oh yeah,
No, she's not.
Very leftist.
Whoa,
The
big
left
time.
Liberal, man.
absolutely
No,
demonize her right now because that one singular topic, and that is all
J.K. Rowling would burn me at the stake, but I made 2 videos supporting her over the last
Really?
year.
I haven't seen the crazier leftist stuff. I've only seen the whole.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, same.
yeah, because that's gone.
I don't agree with her politics, but I agree.
No, no.
I agree with her ability to talk.
No.
Exactly.
Before 2 years ago, when you look back at her history, whoa, far low. I'm like,
yeah.
But after she started getting attacked, like all that's gotten on the back burner because she tried to say, he's like, hey, I'm like one of you. Y'all are really not understanding me, because she's for trans rights. She just doesn't want them to replace women and make women second-class citizens. But that all got shoved aside. Like, look, she sent out a Mother's Day for UK Mother's Day. She sent out this tweet, which I thought was brilliant. And she's like, okay, I'm going to use the left's terminology. And she's like, happy, breastfeeding, parenting, whatever. She used all, and they're like, what an animal you are. She's like, oh, I used your language. Aren't you happy? Would you rather me just say Happy Mother's Day? And they just flipped out. But no,
she stuck to her guns though. More power to her.
She does. She has a great wit. But Good Logic, what do you think about?
Yeah, there's been certainly a weaponization of the fact that they have the ability to. I mean, I think that if you look at numbers, I can't even imagine that the numbers are actually close with respect to people all buying in to every single element of leftist ideology. And as Kara correctly pointed out, and you were just saying pointing out with J.K. Rowling's, there's a slavery of the mindset where once you say I'm part of the left party, well, the left is here today, but we know that 2 years from now, they're going to be over here. And if you're not willing to go that next step with them, you're immediately outcasted. And that's what J.K. Rowling has experienced. Now, she has the power and she has the fame and the wealth and the power and the clout to be able to do that And even though she'll take some heat, it's not going to have any actual impact on her, assuming she has the emotional fortitude to withstand that.
Correct.
Which a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't have that emotional fortitude. So
Because they're weak. Yeah.
Yeah. But they bank on that weakness, on the masses in general. They bank on the fact that you gain, especially amongst our youth, you can climb up the social strata by basically saying that you totally support this type of perspective. And the reason you're climbing up that social strata is not because everyone really believes it, but because the loudest voices out there are free to express it without facing any sort of repercussion, or quite the contrary, they get credit and acclaim for expressing that the furthest leftist ideology of the day, as opposed to if you express something other than that, there's no one who's going to be around, or very few voices like those here on this panel who will be there to support you and say, yeah, what she just said here, saying that she's not down with accepting a notion that we can't tell the difference between a man and a woman. I agree with that. That you recognize that correctly, that under the current political zeitgeist of the Western world, that you're going to be the next one who the guns are squarely aimed at. And people are so terrified of that. They're so terrified of that. And we're not raising our youth to have the backbone to stand up to that. And I think that the jellyfish spines that unfortunately far too many of us in the West have is being weaponized by those who basically feel like I have the freedom and power to say this. Anyone who says anything other than what I'm saying is going to be humiliated by hordes of people who are going to be looking for that social status by agreeing with me and expressing this leftist ideology.
I think you said it perfectly. And we have two people just right here who stood up to cancel culture. You got Kara and Matthew. You were canceled because of the... Yeah. That's why I support also Gina Carano. She showed, fight, dig in your ground. I'll tell you something. Last night I read some of the most disgusting things, like Trump. I saw he made one statement and they were saying, I think you know what I'm talking about.
Bloodbath.
The bloodbath. I'm like, did you play the whole damn clip?
No, they did not play the whole damn
thing. And I'm sitting there going, but see, they want to incite people to something.
Thank God for Twitter, dude.
Thank God for Twitter. Because I thought that was insane. See, I don't see, someone made a comment in the chat. There's no Republican Party. They're right. There's no Republican Party. There's no Democratic Party. There's a uniparty. And 2024 is a fight between those who love America. It's Americanism versus communism. Which one you want? That's all. There's no left, right. There's nuts and there's sane people. But no, I view what Hollywood is doing today as perpetuating a lot. Not everybody, obviously. We can see script doctors here, Matthews here, and Platoon.
I think people like Matthew and Kara have 10,000 times the backbone of a J.K. Rowling. Because they basically are willing to sacrifice everything of what they're stand up for their beliefs. Whereas J.K. Rowling is, as I pointed out, she has power that few people on the planet have, and she knows that
she
can't
doesn't
be
have to
stripped
worry
from her.
about finding another job.
No.
Yeah, my favorite tweet from J.K. was when someone was like, "How do you sleep with yourself at night?" And she's like, "On a bag of your money."
No, somebody that's a good one. Someone last week said, "What a miserable author you are. No one buys your book." She's like, "Well, I didn't know people were using it for insulation." Red French Moon for €5 says Sid Sweeney made her own product company. Oh, Sid Sweeney. Yeah, like that girl. To not 100% depend from Hollywood, that's the move. With anyone but you, success, she might just do that. Thank you, Red French Moon. Did you see the way they used Sweeney a couple of weeks ago on Saturday Night Live?
Oh, yeah.
I thought we've kind of broken through a little bit. You can tell that the culture war shifted because someone's focusing on boobs again. I was like, wow. WG gifted 10 George the Giant Slayer memberships. Thank you, WG. I hope all is well with you. It's been a while. I saw you last week here, but I got to talk to you in the chat. It's great to see you. Thank you for your amazing
Make
support.
boobs great again.
Make boobs great again. I'm all for that. I'm a boob man. Thank God we didn't have those questions when I was growing up. What's a man and a woman?
Make
I was just like,
big again, because there's been boobs, they just haven't been very big. So let's make them big.
True. At least display them a little bit more. Don't hide them underneath the sweaters.
That's a question. Do you think Hollywood has become more prudish in the last few years? Like in
certain aspects?
Yeah.
In in the revealingness of certain outfits, I think yes. But whenever it comes to like sex scenes, I think no. because I feel like every movie nowadays has some sort of like graphic sex scene that makes absolutely no addition to the story whatsoever.
Yeah, I didn't mean that, because you're right. That's graphic discuss. There's no point with it. I meant like sexual, where it's like what is the word?
An aspect of seduction and sexiness without being like
sultry.
Yeah, sultry.
Yeah.
Feminism.
Beauty.
That's been kind
Intimacy.
When I was assisting for casting departments, one of the things that always bothered me is I would always pick the actors from the reels and their headshots where they looked like very beautiful, voluptuous, curvaceous women. And some of the ladies and some of the other men in there would always pick these women that looked like little children that just happened to be tall.
Right.
Like they were underdeveloped. I'm like, well, why would you do that? It's like, well, we don't want to objectify women. It's like, what do you mean don't want to objectify? This is the Hollywood industry. All we do is objectify. You literally just asked me which one is most doable. Like, why would you even care of doing that? But that was just the nature.
They
From
may say that. They just
all
don't
the way
want
up to the 2020s.
appear. They don't appear like they're objectifying them.
Do you all think that there's a distinction between the way they sexualize white women less today versus minorities? That I think you see I actually think you probably see more sexualization when it comes to non-white women. I think that there's a conscious, or at the very least subconscious, or bending of the knee to the culture in trying to avoid sexualizing white women specifically. And I'm wondering.
I would agree. I can see that. There's especially, I had it, I'm trying to find it. There is a new sculpture that is going up in the UK. I believe it is this week. And where is it? Let me read this first and I'll find it. From WG for $50. Thanks, one and all. Keep fighting the good fight and never let the bastards get you down. See, all these people, they're not. They're strong. They got courage. They got heart. They're not. They're going to keep fighting. Thank you, WG. Paulus Plain for Norwegian 200 krona. Georgia Giant Slayer. Americans, please. Do better on international currencies. North Korean dollars. Yes, I know. You are correct. But like I said earlier, I was reading about North Korea this morning. And so I saw NOK and I'm like, oh, North Korea. Dudes. Hello, the script doctor with love from Norway, dude.
Thank you, Paulus Plain.
Thank you, Paulus Plain. GJJ gifted 1 Georgia Giant Slayer membership. Thank you, GJJ. That's really kind of you, because he's someone now just got it, so you gave someone a gift. You made their day.
What a man.
No, that's awesome. Everyone counts. Every super chat counts. It helps keeps the lights on, helps us be able to make more videos, and it just builds a community. I never thought when I started, I remember the very first video I did, I was like, welcome, Slayer Nation. And my editor, my brother, was like, dude, you got like 10 people watching you. I was like,
you gotta start somewhere.
I gotta build it.
Yeah.
But what Good Logic was saying is I guess what all of y'all were saying is where I was going to. The gratuitous sex, that's not to me storytelling. I was talking about the sultry, the seduction, the feminism, beauty. I look at a lot of the actresses today from when I was growing up. It's like, to me, they were more beautiful. They were feminine. And right now they just seem, until Sydney Sweeney, they seemed a lot more
but they have
like my next door neighbor
mindset. Like there's this quixotic and fundamentally incoherent mindset, because if you want to see what the predominant idea about female sexuality in Hollywood is, that women should be able to claim sexuality for themselves in a way that is not reducible to the male gaze. So you are still allowed to have, there's a reason all of these actresses will turn up on Hollywood red carpets wearing very little. That's because they are trying to revel in sexuality, but the feminist defense is, but it's not for you men. This is just women celebrating their innate sexuality, which fundamentally misunderstands what sexuality is. Like, sexuality is not about you as an inner person. Who are you being sexual for? That's kind of the whole way the species reproduces. So it's incoherent to try and claim one thing but not the other, but that's why it seems so incoherent on screen. You can have sex scenes in some contexts, but not in others. What's her name from the Twilight girl who's got a film coming out, which she says wants to be the most queer and sexy thing that's ever been put on screen, and it's basically just prolonged bouts of lesbianism. It's like, fine, that's okay, but Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to point out the correctness of what you're saying, because that's consistent with everything we see from the left, where it's not. It's all about how I feel. If I feel sexy, even if no one in the world deems me sexy, the left wants to proclaim that is what sexy is. It's a redefinition based consistent with everything the left says. If I feel like a woman, I'm a woman. If I feel like I'm sexy, even if no one in the world thinks that I have sexual allure, that by definition is still sexual. So you're correct in your definition of sexual, that the whole point of being sexual is that it's an allure towards others. But the left wants to live in this, wants to bask in this fictitious world where it's what you yourself think that is the only thing that matters. Is that,
well,
I mean,
Joe,
there?
Well, what it is it's this probably the worst phrase ever in the history of the world is "my truth." Right, yes. Like it is just ridiculous and absurd on its face, because there is the truth. And here's the thing: as you know, I just said I watched the Mission Impossible movies recently, and actually Tom Cruise does a really good job of casting really hot women in his movies opposite him. Right, like you think about Paula Patton. Remember the scene where she walks in with the Indian billionaire, and she's just drop dead gorgeous in that dress. And
Rebecca Ferguson. That yellow silk dress, like that is like I got a girl crush on her because of that.
Ferguson,
right?
Ferguson? Yeah.
No, they're all great. That I mean, in every single one. I mean, Emmanuel Beart, who I watched yesterday, and that smoking
Haley
hot.
Atwell.
And yeah, Haley Atwell. I mean, Haley Atwell. I was like, wow, she's really gorgeous. I just watched that like 2 nights ago. I was like, man. Anyway, but the thing is every man will tell women that you have always had the power. This thing about women not being empowered or feeling like they have to be girl bosses and all that, you've always had the power. Because I mean, even I was fortunate to do Helen of Troy. Helen was the face that launched 1,000 ships. Like the sexuality and the beauty of a woman. And everything to do with her, the fact that she can be a mother and all these other aspects, the femininity of it is the power. That is the power. It's not being a man. It's not beating a man at what a man does, right? That is not attractive. And as you said, in this kind of like weird mindset, I mean, you want women to be strong, but let me tell you, my wife has had 8 children. There is not a man on earth that is stronger than my wife, right? In that she's been through pain, she's been through all these different aspects, but it's a different kind of strength. And that's okay, right? It's okay to promote that. It's okay to say that this is a good thing. And we've kind of gone away from that. And like you said, Joe, it's this weird mentality that if I feel like I'm sexy, then I am, and you should think it too. I'm like,
that's the next part. That's the next part. That's how we got to a post-truth world, because they basically start with like, okay, we have general concept of as to what sexual is, which little Platoon like aptly pointed out, that traditionally has what it by definition means that other people find you alluring. Then they change that definition to no, it's not what others feel alluring, it's how you feel about yourself. And then, as Matthew pointed out, the next step is now that they're defining sexual as being about themselves, you have to agree with them. And if not, you're the jackass, you're the racist, you're the phobe of some or ist of some kind that definitely society should scorn and tossed into the forgotten parts of history and throw out everything about you because you're a terrible, terrible person, that you're not agreeing that this is with this person's individual definition. We have seen that in every element of this new woke ideology. That's exactly, it's a 2-step process. First, they redefine the term, and then you must agree with it. Otherwise, you're an ist, you're a phobe, you're a terrible person who society must shun.
But that would be like me getting mad after painting my silver play button gold, and then YouTube not giving me 1 million subscribers.
Well, yeah,
my silver button identifies as a gold button. What?
I want the black button. No, but you're right. It goes on to that. But that's how bullies operate. That's why they don't stop until you stand up to them. The only cure for someone who wants to have tyrannical control is courage. That's it. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because they want it. They start with changing the language, then they change it, then they force you to use it. Then after that, they want you to cheer it on. So that's why I love having this panel together. I mean, we're looking at all these things and we're calling a spade, not calling everything for what it is. And I love it. I want everyone to go check out Matthew Marsden's YouTube channel. Go sign up for it. And everyone here, There's one last question I have. I want to play a 1-minute clip from Tucker Carlson. I want to get everybody's thoughts as we wrap up. He was interviewing Chris Cuomo this week. And I thought it was really important because during the entire interview, they go back and forth about politics, but there's one section where Cuomo pretty much is blaming him for being like a lapdog to Putin for doing the Putin interview. And after that, he starts explaining some of what he saw there, what he liked. But the point I'm about to make is he's talking about art and architecture in our country. And I thought that was relevant to what we're seeing today, again, in Hollywood and in our society. And I want to see what people's thoughts were on it. So hold on one second. Let me get this. Here we go.
Economy. I can
y'all hear it?
Which is a city of 13 million people, much larger than any city we have. Hard to govern a city like that. And there is, no homelessness, no graffiti. It's spotlessly clean. The public spaces are beautiful. The architecture has not been degraded by the oppression of postmodern architecture, which is designed to demoralize and hurt you and destroy your spirit. I believe that because it's true.
You believe that postmodern architecture is designed to kill your spirit?
Of course. What's
Why?
the message of it? Well, look, anything that we make with our hands, it's the purest expression of our creativity. So there's a purpose behind everything that we make. There's a message behind all of it, as there is in all art. You don't paint a painting with no vision behind it. You paint a painting because you're saying something. And so buildings that are warm and human and that elevate the human spirit are pro-human. And brutalism, for example, or the IMP glass boxes that crowd every city in the United States, those are not elevating. What's the message of working in a cube in a room with a synthetic drop ceiling and drywall on the walls and fluorescent lighting ahead of you and no privacy at all? What's the message? The message is really clear. You mean nothing. You are replaceable. You are a widget in a bin awaiting assembly. You're just a cog in a machine. You have no value. And everyone kind of ignores this, like, oh, well, that's the...
So that's what I wanted to ask you. What do you think of that? You think our art is the same way the modern architecture is? Now, Script and I were talking about this a little bit before backstage, but do you think it's designed to demoralize? That what a lot of the films are, besides being bad films or not having the proper storytellers? Little Platoon?
So Tucker infuriates me.
Okay.
In the first place, there are homeless people in Moscow. There's a lot of homeless people in Moscow. Being given a guided tour around the Kremlin is not representative of the state of Moscow generally, or Russian architecture generally. The Kremlin was built between the 14th and the 17th centuries. The brutalism that he's describing in architectural terms, really sort of pioneered by the likes of Le Corbusier, was a radical idea born out of Russian communism, essentially. What do you think brutalism is? Where do you think brutalism comes from? It was a social experiment. You used to try and build these massive, great cities in the sky connected tower blocks, which are fundamental of brutalism in the 60s in this country, which were all social engineering projects by the Labour Party of the day, which had their roots in sort of proto-communist ideologies. And Russia exported a huge amount of that. And you find a huge amount of that in Russia itself. He's right in the sense that it crushes the human spirit. I think he's right, but for completely the wrong reasons. He mischaracterizes Russia, whilst also making a fairly sensible point, which is that brutalism does destroy the human spirit. That, after all, is kind of what communism was supposed to do. It's just that Russia gave us that architectural style to begin with. The other side of that, you get the modern sort of plate glass skyscraper, which is a complete, almost inversion of the old brutalist motto. And that's a uniquely Western problem. What we have there is the elevation of the architect as genius, and it's part of the cult of the artist as genius. If you look at the skyline of London now, or even the skyline of Paris, where the symmetry that you used to be able to see from the Eiffel Tower has been completely ruined because they keep allowing these wacko architects to stick up stupidly shaped skyscrapers. That's all about saying the artist is a genius, the architect is a genius, and he has got a unique vision, and also he's funded by Saudi Arabia, so we let him build whatever he wants to build, without regard for the landscape of the place he's building in, the skyline of the city that he's destroying. That's all about the cult of the individual. And that's a problem as well in architectural terms. Kingsley Amis used to say that the architect is pretty much the only artist around who is able to sod the entirety of the public in one move. unlike any other artist who have to go to an art gallery to see a shit painting. But the architect can brutalize your entire skyline. All he has to do is sign one contract. So Tucker's basically right about that, but without understanding what the causes of those two different things are.
And that's why I love having you, Platoon. See, you put it so beautifully. I love your take on that. No, it's good. That's when you bring a good mix of people together, we get everyone's perspective. We find the truth in between. And just like you nailed it, thank you for that. Because I was really thinking about it all week. But do you see any of that play out in the films?
Yeah.
Kind of that brutality, but purposeful.
We were talking about it earlier about the need for individuals to shepherd their creation from beginning to end in order to correct some of the problems, which I broadly do agree with. I think it's much better to have a consistent vision, even if the vision is wrong, than to have an inconsistent mess created by a committee in a studio. But you do also get the cult of the artist as genius in film. I'm thinking like Rian Johnson, for example. When Rian Johnson takes over Star Wars, what is Rian Johnson's ultimate aim with that franchise? It's to say, I, Rian Johnson, have changed Star Wars forever. And he did. Everyone knows Rian Johnson did The Last Jedi. Like that, his name is inseparable from that film. He accomplished his fundamental goal, which is to leave a personal mark on the artwork that he's shepherding. It's a very bad thing, because quite often people who are obsessed with self-promotion and people who are obsessed with the artist as self have no conception of what the broader creative thing they're doing really is, which is what allows you to destroy characters like Luke Skywalker, because you don't really value them. You just value putting your own stamp on somebody else's universe. So to that extent, yeah, you see a very similar mentality to building glass skyscrapers in auteur directors coming in and ruining products. Rings of Power for Amazon. I'm pretty sure when they say, we're going to tell the story that Tolkien never could, that's very much the same mindset at play. They don't understand Tolkien, but they do understand that it's popular, and they understand it's a great way of putting their names out there. They can say, we were given the biggest project that Amazon has ever spent money on. Look at what we personally have done with it. The fact
but
that
who the hell
shit
would be
is
proud of that? But why would you? Who would be proud of that? I look at them and I'm like, what fools? And I think I think so many others do. It's like Payne and McKay, known for the Rings of Power. I'm like, and
well,
now
George, if you look at the original material, and again, I hate to bring fate into this. If you look at Tolkien, I actually went to the same school as Tolkien did, so that's my big claim to fame. And I actually grew up in a brutalist environment in the Midlands, which the little Platoon will tell you about. So it was a very industrial area that actually I always tell people I grew up in Mordor. But if you look at the great inspiring buildings of the past, they've all been linked in some way, shape, or form to a higher power. Is that the people wanting to achieve something bigger and better than themselves? Right? I mean, I'm a Catholic guy. I can't tell you how horrible nearly every church has been made since the 1960s onwards. Despicable, disgusting, uninspiring buildings. I was in one this morning. It's horrible, and it doesn't do any. It's meant to. These things are meant to elevate you, make you look towards a higher power, to God, right? And that's music as well, right? Music is meant to elevate you. It's meant to pull you along towards something that's bigger and more important than yourself. And I think those themes that come through story are the same. They're exactly the same. So what is the journey that the person is being on? What are they going on? What are they overcoming, and why are they overcoming it? And where are they going? And when you're shown a movie, especially the core of it, the center of it is the screenplay, but everything else should be, you should be looking at truth. As an actor, you pursue truth. As a screenwriter, you pursue truth. As when you're looking at something as a cinematographer and as a director's got the whole picture, but the cinematographer is should be looking for the most beautiful way to convey what the director's trying to put over in that scene. Okay, so all that is going towards, theoretically, something bigger than yourself. Whereas when like Platoon was saying, is that director is actually saying, I am God. I am God. I am the higher power. I am the one that is influencing all this. So really, you serve me, right? And the great actors, whom they might have egos, they might want to fight when they get in there and look at the screenplay and say, I want this, I want that. But ultimately, it's about the truth of the role. It's about the truth of the role within the truth of the story. Okay, so, and all that should go to something bigger than yourselves. I would say it's a higher power. You're trying to inspire and overcome. Like, why are you overcoming something? Right? Why? What's the point? Why are we talking about standing up? And I want to thank Joe for giving me props and giving Cara props on that. Why is that an admirable characteristic, to stand up against something, to risk to lose everything? Right? Because if there wasn't something bigger than us, we'd just say, well, you're a dummy. You should just take the money and fold. Right? So we know innately that this is something that drives the human spirit, or should drive the human spirit. And again, as the little platoon said, the architects become like, I am God. I am the one that's inspiring all this, rather than I am the one that's trying to reflect and point towards something bigger than me. So that's my take on it.
Beautiful. Anybody else before we start winding down?
No, they were that was all said beautifully. I got nothing to add there.
I don't have anything to contribute on that front. Only thing that I have to say is Tucker Carlson was sounding a little bit communistic there at the end, referring to human beings in a cubicle as part of the machine and whatnot. Basically, that's kind of the earlier talking points that people on the extreme left would use to try and sway them over to their side about being anti-capitalistic. You're just a cog. You mean nothing. You're in a cubicle. You're doing this. You need to rise up, and you need to take out the big capitalistic dog that is exploiting you. Like, that's what I saw from that. And I'm like, dude, you've been drinking too much of the Kool-Aid over there in Russia.
Well, to be fair, though, like, that's how a lot of people feel. I feel like the game is now pretty much rigged. They've if life was a video game, they've patched the hard work exploit, they've patched the smart work exploit, all the big exploits for being able to rise above your class and become better than what you were born into is becoming gatekept to the point where it's almost impossible, especially if you have traditional values. And I'm not trying to be black here, Bill, here.
You solve that by breaking down the cronyism with that's corrupting capitalism.
I completely agree with you, but I don't know how to do that. And I think most people don't. Most of us, like, either our options are keep failing or just join the system, right?
Yeah, no joining the system.
I'll tell
right.
You, Script Doctor, I'll tell you that Tucker actually explained later, shortly thereafter in that interview with Chris Cuomo, because I went through it on stream the entire interview. And he explained that it really wasn't as much a praise of Russia as it was a call for America to do better. Yes. I really appreciate the insightfully nuanced response from Little Platoon as far as breaking down the good and the bad in Tucker's analysis. And I think we need a lot more of that critical analysis where it's not like everything this person says is good or everything he says is bad. Let's try and parse out the parts which which make sense and are insightful, and the parts which might be glossing or missing actual context. For example, I was unaware. Look, I don't know much about Russia or Moscow in particular. I don't know about the poverty or whether Tucker's portrayal of it is accurate, or Little Platoon who says, look, he got a guided tour. And it's kind of like when President Xi came through San Francisco and they cleaned up certain parts and say, here, look over here. Don't look at the rest of the city. And maybe Putin gave Tucker the same type of treatment when he came through Moscow, which is why Tucker came away with such an appreciation for the architecture and the beauty of that city, and was calling for more. That's very possible, and something I hadn't actually considered, which is part of the reason I appreciate Little Platoon's perspective there. But I think that to just take it as being like that he was trying to say, I love Putin, I think that's a lot of what the left wants us to believe, that you should not listen to this person because he's evil, because he's not willing to universally condemn and look at things with the proper context and nuance. And I think that this type of dialogue is so important for us to be able to rise above that and basically assess what is good about something, what may be inaccurate, whether it's intentional or unintentionally inaccurate, and try to actually find truth. And the only way we can do it is through dialogue like this. So I really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to have you back on, Good Logic.
Yes,
and thank you all for coming. Please start with Matthew. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you're going to be up to.
Well, what I'd like more than anything is for people to go over to my sparsely populated YouTube channel right now, because as we were saying before, I think people don't understand that they have the power, right? They have the power. The left will go and back their people up to the hilt, and we don't. Like, our side just doesn't do that. So what's really important is that, and it goes for every single person on here, everyone has something to lose, right? Every single person has something to lose, but they can't win if we have numbers. And so that's part of my mantra has been since I started the show, and I was meant to have a couple of interviews and I haven't managed to do them because my wife went out of town. But it's really important so that we don't get canceled for people to go and follow each individual on this and just click the button. Because if you are not willing to click a button, you're not going to get I don't got to watch what I say now after what Trump said, right? Because people, you don't want to go to war. They were like, "You said go to war."
Oh, bloodbath.
Yeah, it's a bloodbath. No, but you know what I mean? Like you like I look around at this panel, I'm like, my people, right? It's really important. You look around and you see these new friends that you get, and I'm very grateful for that. By the way, I'm very grateful for each and every one of you and what you said and what you've stood up for. You know, as Cara probably tell you, it's very lonely sometimes out there. Or, you know,
especially when you look at the person that you thought was your friend and who would stick up for you was just
yeah.
No,
it's absolutely right. So I think that if you go and you subscribe to each person on here, like I said, just a click of a button. Even if it's for us to go, oh, you know what? There are people out there that are willing to stand up. It's not just lip service. And certainly for me, I'll tell you right now, I think I told you before, George, the amount of actors that have DM'd me and said, "Hey, Matt, like, we love what you're doing." I'm like, really, dude? Like, you're still earning $100,000 an episode doing television shows, and, you know, you haven't stood up. Like, what have you got to lose? So that's what I would say. And I think the guys have put links to my YouTube channel on there.
Yes, they have.
Thank you so very much for having me on again, and I want to thank all the other panelists. I feel like Joe does. I feel it's really great to hear different perspectives and to have my mind opened even further. So thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Script Doctor.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, and also being able to meet Matthew in this element here. And then, of course, recount with some of the other panelists whom I've known for some time. For myself, I do a Saturday show at 7 p.m. Eastern called Scripts on Saturdays. So with regards to the culture that Hollywood is putting out, I am actually providing a counter, because I know plenty of screenwriters out there that do not follow all this ideology. I know many of them that also do. And I have been, during the writer's strike, I managed to negotiate with a whole bunch of people and get my legal filings in order to basically discuss screenplays that are currently circulating around Hollywood that are looking for a home. And we don't spoil them on the big parts, but we analyze the writing, we analyze the story structure, what they do. We do that every Saturday at 7 p.m. We pick one script, we read it off camera. It's not shared to the public, but you can find it with a little bit of elbow grease, because a lot of writers like to share their stuff for that. And we discuss it to let you know that, yes, not every writer in Hollywood is an ideological, towing the line schlub. There's actually people out there that have great stories and interesting perspectives that they want to share with you that is definitely needed in Hollywood to invest in and support. So I give a little bit of a voice to that as well. So you can go check that out every Saturday on my channel at youtube.com/thescriptdoctor.
Awesome. Brian?
Yeah, you can find me at the Popcast. So it's just youtube.com/the Popcast. Like I said, my silver play button identifies as a gold play button, but YouTube won't reflect that. So yeah, come watch me. I do. My brother and I actually make long form documentaries, basically. So like 45 to an hour and 20-minute docs on franchises. And our last one we just did Dune. So the definitive history of Dune. Beautiful. And we got a pretty awesome one coming up next week. And the one before that was, I think, Willy Wonka, and before that was like Firefly or something. But yeah, check it out. It's
What's
all
coming up? What's coming up?
I can't tell you. I'm not allowed to tell you. My brother will get upset.
Okay.
But let's just say it does coincide with a certain movie that's also coming up.
Okay.
Oh, Deadpool.
No, that's too far away.
Too far. Okay. Well, we'll see when it comes out. Little Platoon, you next?
Yeah, I am working on a Dune video right now, in fact, which I'd hoped would be out next weekend, but somehow the script began back in, I think, the 1700s. So it's taking a little bit of time to pull that together. But eventually it will come out. But otherwise, yeah, do a little live show on Monday nights on my channel. And I'm on Twitter at Platoon Pod. But yeah, thank you so much again for having me. It's one of the best streams, as I keep saying, and I mean it. It's great to chat to you all.
Thank you. Always love having you, Platoon. Kara?
Oh goodness. So I am actually one of the few here, I think, that really gear more towards like the gaming scene. Most of my content is all video game related. Like I was just streaming with Az and Quarter Black Garrett and X-Ray Girl, where we were playing some Helldivers 2, and it's just pure chaos, which is the best kind of gaming. But that's a majority of my content that I tend to gear towards. I am still very small here on YouTube. I am pretty close to hitting 5,000 subs on there though.
Hey, way to go.
Which is baby steps.
Woo!
Baby steps. But I will be at the F&T meetup in Vegas here coming up here soon, in just a few weeks. So excited. Are any of you guys, George, you're going to be there, aren't you?
I will be there. I will be there.
I should be there, barring any serious
Nice.
issues.
It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I'm so excited. I do work for Eric July. I am the customer support manager for the Rippaverse. So we have Yaira that just kicked off last week, and we've already hit $1.2 million
Hell yeah.
for this campaign, which is freaking killer. I'm just, I'm very, as much as being canceled sucked, I am very grateful to be where I am right now. And surrounded by people that I don't feel like I have to hold my tongue or to even curb my opinion. And so I just want you guys to know that I appreciate all of y'all. And it's definitely been an eye-opener being welcomed into this community. And I always love being on your show, George, because I mean, like a lot of us, like we have very different opinions and perspectives on things. And I like that we are able to discuss that in like instead of a emotional manner and more of like a critical thinking manner. And I just really enjoy being here.
Well, thank you. Because I think, yeah, next week, I think for our show, we have Gary from Neurotic is going to be here. But I also think, yeah, is he coming? Is that what we were saying? Might come. Eric July might come. We're not sure yet, but he might come. But
that's what he said. You said Gary.
Yeah, I said, no, Gary's coming. Yeah, because he's already.
So Eric is planning to. It's on his schedule.
Okay. So we might have Gary and Eric July here both at the same time. We'll have a great discussion. Good Logic. I was really glad that you came. I know it was kind of at the last minute. So
I want you timing confusion because
not a problem.
Ironman said noon till 2:30, and I'm on East Coast time, and I'm like, I was like,
not a problem.
Yeah, but anyway,
I had the same problem, dude. I messed up the time too because the time changed.
Geez, like wow.
Well, I hope you come back. We'll have you back. We'll get to spend more time. Tell everybody where you're at.
I definitely will. If you want to find me, the best place is really on Locals because that's where links. If you go to goodlogic.locals.com, that little name at the tag at the bottom there, that's really the best place to find me. But I'm going to urge all of you who are watching this is as follows. When a panel is assembled like this, first of all, there's a lot of work that goes into just putting together a panel and getting people to show up. And traditionally, 30% of people who are watching a show are not subscribed, which is why you should really show your love to George and make sure you hit like and subscribe and share because it's a difficult thing to do. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Little Platoon because he has that phenomenal British accent, which makes his intelligent insights seem that much more sincere. And he happens to actually bring genuine insight. But what I want to point out to each of you is this: to smaller channels, just a couple of dozen people coming over from their appearance over here and just hitting like and subscribe, they notice numbers of subscribers. Like it's a tiny little tick is something that they notice. You think, if I go over there, is it going to do anything? Is it going to help me? No. Then they're not going to know, whatever. I might not be interested in this topic. I'm telling you, you're mistaken. especially for channels which are like under which are still in the growth stage. 5,000, 10,000, something like that. It's a couple dozen people is a big deal. So I'm going to urge you all that whether you're into gaming or not, give Kara a check out. Matthew Marsden, he's got a great YouTube, he's got a great Twitter following, and stuff like that. But his channel is first starting out. Please make sure that you give him a subscribe as well. Script Doctor over there seems to be really insightful. And Brian, I myself am dying to see what he's going to be popping out. So make sure
Check it out.
Just if you spend. Their reward is not financial, not anything. It's fun to have these conversations. We all enjoy. We actually genuinely enjoy doing it. But for us, for especially a smaller creator, the idea to have that exposure and have more people actually check out their work is a massive deal. So I urge each of you to please just spend the 3 minutes to go around to especially these smaller, the smaller channels here like Kara, Matthew, Script, and Brian, and make sure that you give them a follow, check out their work. And that's how you encourage people to come back to panels like this and have greater dialogues like this in the future.
Well, thank you, Good Logic. He said it beautifully, didn't he? So everybody, go to these amazing people, subscribe to them. Start with Matthew, Kara, Little Platoon, Brian, Script, and Good Logic. We're going to have them all back because they're brilliant minds. And we have 2 more super chats before we go, which came in lately. Okay, we have Olaf for €2. Looking forward to next Wednesday's member stream. So am I. We'll have a good old-fashioned get-together. Olaf, can't wait to see you there again. Paulus Plain, again, with 100 Norwegian krona. Hello. The Script Doctor with love from Norway, dude. You have access to authentic Canadian poutine. Is it poutine or poutine? I can never say it.
Poutine, I think. Right?
Either one is fine. I'm worried that I've got a stalker in Paulus Plain right now.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Script Doctor. When I said it last time, poutine, half my family thought I meant something because in Greek, putana is something different. And so I was like, they're like, did you just say you had putana? I'm like, no, poutine.
Come here for the free putan.
So, if you want to win every battle and stay true to yourself, all you got to remember is we never bow down, we never bend the name. I'll see you next week. Always forward. And one of these days, we're going to get the outro right, where it's going to be exactly the second that I say always forward.